Hey there, and welcome to That Bond Show, that nerdy site's newest show and the internet's #1 James Bond rewatch show, hosted by two guys named Logan and Trevor. Probably. Join us as each week we dive through a new Bond movie from Dr. No to No Time to Die. I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson, and joining me, as always, on this double O journey is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Speaking
Also
of,
joining us,
my collection is complete. My No Time to Die DVD came in the mail this last week, so
Good.
I now have all of them ready to go. I'm ready for the rest
There
of this,
you go.
the rest of this run.
The rest of this journey. This week we have a special 4-person episode of That Bond Show. Also joining us is our resident quartermaster of that nerdy site, Frank Pisani.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm excited to be here.
And the biggest Long Island sports fan west of the Mississippi, Cameron Abbott.
Hey, what's going on, Bond fans?
There we go. This is a very exciting episode with all four of us on it for the first time. Me and Trevor welcoming some guests. Because this week we'll be discussing the 8th Bond movie, Live and Let Die, released in June 27th of 1973. We're going to the summer, baby. Typically, we kind of run over myself and Trevor's thoughts. Trevor's thoughts on this movie in terms of his history is he hasn't never seen it before. We're kind of in that era for him, as we've kind of established. For mine, I love Live and Let Die. It's one of my favorite Bond movies. But I'm much more curious about Frank and Cam. Cam, we'll go to you first. What is kind of your history with Live and Let Die?
Well, it ties into my history with Bond films in general. You know, growing up, my dad was like a bit of a sci-fi geek, and so growing up was like regular watchings of Star Trek: The Next Generation and Star Wars and stuff like that. But what really kind of separated it out from that is my dad was never a big fan of James Bond. He thought the gadgets were cool, but my father, being the moral fortitude person he is, thought Bond himself was a slimy creep. And said emphasized that to me. Not wrong at all. 100% not wrong. But my older brother actually was a big Bond fan, and we used to watch marathons of Bond films on the Turner Broadcast System, aka TBS, Channel 16, for those who are aware of local non-cable affiliate channels for the Turner Broadcast System. So,
that is not like 16 when I was growing up out here was UPN. So the channels have changed.
That is for there is
we don't need to go at all down this rabbit hole, Cameron.
You're right. You are right, Trevor. We're not. I'm a big fan of just watching these films as a kid. Being kind of it's funny too because I was never too interested in the romance side. Go figure. I wasn't ever interested in the romance side of Bond. I was more interested in the villains, the gear, the technology, but also just kind of like that spy back and forth cat and mouse game that used to get played back and forth between Bond and his villains. The villain always makes the best, whether or not it's going to be a good Bond movie. And so I hold to that to this day. And so Live and Let Die is one of those films that I've always really loved because it's also one of the only times, if ever he has ever done it in other places, where Bond has acknowledged the supernatural as far as
we'll get there.
How it impacts his spy career. And and it's also go figure, it also has some great touchstones to early 70s black films coming out of Harlem at the time. So it's the touchstones on it are just all over the place, but they touch in several places for me, and I just love this movie.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Paul McCartney.
We will for sure get to that. Frank, what is your history with Live and Let Die?
Yeah. I with Bond in general, I didn't really grow up with it, and I kind of got into it when I was a teenager, and kind of did what you guys are doing, where you went kind of back through just the entire franchise back to back to back. And this is one of my favorites. It is not my favorite, at the #1, but we were saying, we were kind of talking earlier off mic, I was I think this is probably for me, number 5 out of it is in my top 5, but it's just kind of on the kind of the cutting room floor of it. But I like a lot of what this movie does, though. I love Roger Moore. I think he's a great Bond. I think this is dope because this is young Roger Moore before he gets super old, and he is awesome and charming and super funny. And there is bad parts of the movie, I'm sure we'll get into, but there's so much of it that I love. And to Cam's point there, and I think it's something we'll probably talk about more, I do love the blaxploitation part of it. Like it totally feels like Shaft and like Superfly, and like those are movies I had seen before I had ever saw this, weirdly enough. But it was just like it feels so different than any other James Bond movie, and it has like its own unique style and feeling, and like you could see random parts of it and you'll just be like, oh, that's Live and Let Die. And so what Cam mentioned there too, it has a banger theme song. Like this is by far my favorite Bond song. And one of the other things we talked about earlier that I love is how it's routinely utilized throughout the movie. Like it really is the theme of the movie, where they break different segments out and it's like, oh, this actiony part, put that over an action scene. Oh, this like violin part, put it over a love scene. And then there's even like orchestral remixes, and there's like an R&B version or kind of like a soul version that happens in the club. Like I love that there's just like a bunch of different weird remixes and ways they utilize the song through the whole movie. And so, yeah, that's the one of, honestly, it really boosts the movie up, which I know sounds silly for me, but it's something I really love about it. And I think that's most of it.
Yeah, I think, so me and Frank, I already basically recorded the podcast earlier today at lunch we had together. But I think, yeah, Live and Let Die is one that I've always really loved. Cameron and Frank kind of touched on a lot of the elements. I think it's just fun, and it is such a distinct thing. And one of the things you'll hear me say on the show will be the fact that, like, I think it's very interesting to kind of view this film almost as a spiritual sequel to Goldfinger. Because I think it has a lot of similar elements to what makes that film so special. Our character over here. But before we get any further into that, let's run to the cast and crew of Live and Let Die. We have got Roger Moore starring as James Bond in his first time in the role. He will be here for the next 7 weeks, so I hope you like him, guys. Roger Moore. And as Frank said, a very young, a very, very good looking Roger Moore here. It is so funny to me because I think Frank kind of touched on it. Like Roger Moore in me is like always burned in my mind as like a 50 something like James Bond who's kind of gray and is like not necessarily all there. And here he looks so good. It's a trivia fact too, but like older than Sean Connery is in his last movie. And if you had asked him it before I knew this fact, I would not have made that bet because he looks definitely better than Sean Connery does by Diamonds Are Forever. I was like shocked at the beginning of the movie when he shows up and he's so young and good looking. Yes, I was like, oh my 100%. God, like because after
our trip, I was gonna. Sorry, go ahead, Frank.
No, my only kind of last thing was my lasting memory of him is from like A View to a Kill, which is his last movie. Like when you watch them in order, you leave him being old, and when you just jump back into Live and Let Die, I'm like, oh, he's like young and like super hot and like charming and funny, and he has great sense of style too. Like a lot of great outfits in this movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say after our discussion where we talked about how old Roger Moore was during our Disneyland trip, I was not prepared for just like how young and hot he was, and it's like. Technically, he's not young, but holy crap, is he hot. He's so good looking in this, and he's dressed to like the 10s, not even the 9s, the 10s. Like, so good. Like, I love, like, his casual style is just so good.
And that's what everybody talks about Daniel Craig coming out of the water. And I'm like, nobody's talking about Roger Moore with the tan pants and the black shirt that's like popped open at the top. I'm like, this man's like killing it out here.
Yeah, 100% agree. We also have Jane Seymour as Solitaire. Oh, I have the hiccups.
This is gonna be a long one.
We will definitely get to Solitaire in this movie because she is she's an interesting character for sure. Outside of Solitaire, let me pull up the doc again. We've got David Hedison as Felix Leiter.
He's great.
We've got what?
He's great. I love him.
He's so good. I love David Hedison. Like we'll get into him more, but like he's easily one of my favorite interpretations of Felix's character. Like probably him and Jack Lord and Dr. No, I think both are great. And we get quite a lot of him here. We have Julius W. Harris as Teehee. We've got Earl Jolly Brown as Whisper. We've got Jeffrey Holder, again, iconic, as Baron Samedi. Clifton Harns as Sheriff J.W. Pepper, who I know Trevor loves. Lois Maxwell as Moneypenny, and then Bernard Lee as M, as always.
I think you skipped over.
You skipped over
Yaphet
the most
Kotto as Kananga.
Oh, did I? Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
As
Well, thank you for catching
Kananga
that. Mr. Big.
Mr. Big.
Thank you for catching that. Then
one of my favorite villains of all time, hands down.
Totally.
Just a
terrific
that,
villain.
then.
I can't wait to talk more about it.
And then this movie is directed by Guy Hamilton in his third time in the director's chair after Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever. That
is 3 very different movies. Yeah.
Don't worry, spoiler alert for next week, he's going to come back one last time for Man with the Golden Gun. And I was thinking a lot about Guy Hamilton today. God damn it. And the fact that, like, he is responsible for 2 of my 5 or 6 favorite Bond movies in Goldfinger and Live and Let Die, and 2 of my least favorite Bond movies in Man with the Golden Gun and Diamonds Are Forever. Man with the Golden Gun is at least fun, but it is rough. In the Blast from the Past section, the president was Richard Nixon. The prime minister was Ed Heath. My dad was 15 years old, and the highest grossing movie in the US was The Exorcist. In the UK, it was Live and Let Die. Meanwhile, the New York Knicks won their second, and it should be noted, final NBA title. And in the recurring What Were the Beatles Doing section, Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney single Live and Let Die was released, and George Harrison released Livin' in the Material World, the follow-up to All Things Must Pass. Whew, okay. Well, this is going to be a fun podcast. You're right, Trevor.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Like, whenever you get hiccups on a podcast, I'm like, oh, this is either going to go, like, he's going to be done with them really quick, or we're going to be 45 minutes into it, and he's still going to have the hiccups.
I'm still going to have them. I've been having them.
You got to figure out how to like, handle those.
I've been having them on and off since yesterday. I had them at lunch with Frank. It's a bane of my existence. It's my least favorite thing. In the trivia section, though, Roger Moore, as you kind of touched on, was 45 years old when he inherited the role of 007, thus becoming the oldest actor ever to portray the secret agent for the first time, a record he still holds to this day. Indeed, the gap between Moore and Connery was prominent in that their ages were so far apart, with Connery being just 32 when he first started as James Bond, the second youngest after Lazenby, 37 when he left for the first time, and 41 in his final Bond movie. 4 years younger than Moore is here, and again, I bet no one could have guessed that fact, because Sean Connery is looking a little rough for wear in Diamonds Are Forever, and Roger Moore is looking hot to goddamn trot out here.
Logan, while you deal with hiccups, do you want me to jump in and take some of the trivia stuff?
Please do.
Okay. On the other end of the spectrum, at
Trevor.
just 33, Yaphet Kotto was the youngest ever actor to play a Bond villain. So you got that. You got that on the flip side of things here. And it's like, I will say, watching this for the first time, he doesn't read that young. And especially, there are elements of the movie where it's like the character seems like the character's supposed to be older when he talks specifically about, like, your mother was the same way, talking to Solitaire, like, as if, like, oh, so he's probably supposed to be like a 40-something, 50-something kind of, like, year-old, like prime minister of this, like, Caribbean country, and they just were like, oh, let's just cast this other guy instead. So that was definitely an interesting call out here. Up next,
well, I think they needed somebody to be a believable Mr. Big. I think is part of the struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean that's
imagine.
fair, and we can certainly dive into the Mr. Big conversation later, because, like, he came out and I was like, oh, that is not good makeup. I'm pretty sure, like, I went in kind of not knowing what was going to happen. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Kananga, right? But what did they do to his face? And so that was a very weird, like it was not, because this was a few years before, like, Eddie Murphy does, like, his whole, like, sketch in New York as, like, being a white man kind of thing. So, not the best makeup sell here, for the Kananga Mr. Big switch, but, Next on the trivia docket, Roger Moore wrote a production diary during filming simply titled Roger Moore as James Bond 007, Live and Let Die. Rolls off the tongue is the commentary Logan put in his notes. It was published in 1973, and it runs through filming from the first to last days, features photos, stills, and also runs over many behind-the-scene productions and incidents. I saw this trivia as well, and I'll highlight that like it also was unprinted for many many years. Like it had a kind of an initial run and became like an incredible like collector's item over the years because it was never getting like republished, but I believe it has since been republished in like 2018 or something like that, so it's refreshed and reavailable out there for people. This is the only film from between From Russia with Love to The World Is Not Enough not to feature Desmond Llewellyn as Q, a span of 18 movies and 36 years. This is the second film in the series in which Bond doesn't appear in the pre-credits sequence after From Russia with Love, even though obviously From Russia with Love does feature Bond in the pre-credit sequence. It's just not Bond. It's a decoy doppelganger as Bond. Which also is I guess disregarding the fact that Dr. No did not have a pre-credits sequence. So yeah. Rosie Carver is the first black Bond girl to appear in the series and would be the last until Halle Berry in Die Another Day 30 years later. And Kananga is the first and according to Logan's notes here, I believe the only black Bond villain the series has seen so far. Scene of Bond running over the crocodiles at the farm wasn't a bit of movie magic, but an actual stunt. It took crocodile wrangler and stuntman Ross Kananga, the villain in the movie is named after him, 6 takes to complete the scene, where he doubles for Roger Moore when Bond flees the bad guys by running across the backs of 3 crocodiles in a swamp. Kananga received $60,000 for the stunt, filmed at Swamp Safaris, his 350 acres of mangrove swamp on Jamaica's north coast, where he kept a herd of over 1,000 crocodiles. In a 1973 interview, he explained something like that is almost impossible to do, so I had to do it like 6 times before I got it right. I fell 5 times. Film company kept sending to London for more clothes. The crocs were chewing off everything when I hit the water, including shoes. I received 193 stitches on my leg and face. Which is definitely one of those, like, I look at that, I'm like, why didn't they just use animatronics or something? Like, why didn't they just call up Disney for and borrow some crocs from like the Jungle Cruise to do that bit? But
I think it comes down to the guy. For me, the guy has always come across as a yeah, it took me about 6 tries to get it just right.
Yeah,
like they're probably like, hey, we got it on like try 2 or 3. He goes, no, you're gonna want to get the perfect one here.
I mean, he's saying he fell in the water a lot, so like I think there was probably like 1 good take that they got out of that, and every other one was he maybe jumped on 2 crocodiles and then just fell straight in the water and got his leg chewed up or something.
Sorry, go ahead, Cam. That's just, it's slightly differently, but that's one of the things I like about this movie a lot. Not just that alligator stunt, but I like that all of the effects are practical. Like, and some of them actually impress me on like what they were able to do, even just with like crashing cars and blowing up stuff and like. But everything in this movie is practical, and people actually had to do it. Just like that guy actually had to run over 3 crocodiles and make it. And like, I'm totally with you. Yeah, there's probably other ways they probably could have got around it and faked it. But I thought for the fact that it's crazy to watch a movie where that guy actually had to do that. And I also thought they filmed it really well, where we know it's not Roger Moore, but I thought they hit it fairly well, where like they like don't show the head. They like shoot him from like the shoulder down and then they show you the front shot of like Roger Moore. And it's just a thing for like such an old movie. I thought they faked it super well. And then also it's crazy that guy actually ran over 3 alligators. Like this is the Lion King game on Genesis. Well, he just jumped over them. Like
he's the one that suggested it. Because they asked him, how would you get across if you couldn't use a boat? And he said, well, I'd run along the backs of them. And they said, what? He goes, yeah, let me line them up. And he did it for him. And they're like, cool, let's put that in the movie. And then he proceeded probably not to do like the best takes 5 times. And then he nailed it the 6th time. And they're like, great. And they're like, dude, are you bleeding from the face? Oh, yeah, I probably just got bit up there on the face there about that. Like, you have, like, remember, these are Bayou people. Like,
sure. I mean, I will say, I assumed it was like a fake stunt, or like I assumed it was fake crocodiles or something.
Oh, same.
So like that is a bunch of money badly spent, because like it doesn't come across like it's a guy running across real crocodiles. Like it comes across as like, oh, okay, they figured out some kind of movie magic to do that. Like in the same vein of like some of the snake stuff later, it's like, okay, like, or I guess actually at the beginning of the movie, like when the first guy gets killed with snake bite, like a guy's just holding it there. I'm like, that looks like a very rubber snake. Like, is it real? Is it? And then he just kind of like hits the guy with the snake, and I'm like, yeah, that just looked like a fake rubber snake. What was the point of this sequence?
The point is, Trevor, in the early 70s, people believed it.
I mean, like that's clearly, I guess, what's going on here, because yeah, none of it read as like as real compared to like the boat chase sequence next, or that would kind of follow that, of like, okay, that like is clearly like a lot of like real like actual production stuff. I just did not assume when he's running across that those were real crocodiles. Like finding out after the fact that they were, it's like, oh, okay, that's, I guess, neat, but it's a lot of like, did they get their money's worth out of that, or could they have, found a cheaper way to do a cheaper and safer way to do that, that still would have gotten the exact same effect across, since, but whatever.
And that won't be the last time that this comes up in a Bond movie where they do something like practically like that, where you're like, you could have just done something different that was a lot safer and even better for the animals involved. And
yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. I mean, we talked extensively when we talked about the Thunderball, like, oh, they're just shooting harpoons at real life sharks. Like they straight up, like, this is straight up before PETA giving or anybody giving a shit about what PETA says. So yeah, that was they clearly, back here in the 60s and 70s was not a concern of theirs.
I mean, Walt Disney famously blew up a cliffside in order to chase lemmings off of a cliff, in order to get his narrative that lemmings will follow each other off a cliff.
I mean, I don't think that's famously did it. I think we have found out that he did it. But I will also point out, as I've touched on, I think in some D+ stuff, he was also like a significant conservationalist on a lot of his like true life nature documentary stuff too. So, but anyway,
yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, they don't let animal rights get in the way of a good shot. Is what I'm putting out there.
Okay. I mean, yes, but times have changed.
Oh, for sure.
The boat chase through the bayou set a world record for its speedboat jump with a boat going 110 feet. And then again, that way more of a practical kind of thing. Logan's got a note in here. I don't think it's necessarily entirely intentional, but it is interesting. The subtitle changes between Moore's and Connery's Bond here. Moore never orders. The subtle changes. Sorry, not subtitle changes.
I was like, well, subtitle changes.
Moore never orders the vodka martini, but instead a bourbon neat. The briefing occurring in Bond's home and MI6's office, and Bond does not wear a hat, starting a trend. And also Bond smokes cigars instead of cigarettes. I did see notes something to the effect that like a lot of those changes were intentional to try and set this apart from what Connery had done.
And that's what I
like there are definitely, I took a note at some point in this. I'm like, oh, this version of Bond just loves the hell out of cigars. Okay. Because he's got some like almost comically big ones a couple times throughout the film.
I will say though, it would make sense, because if you're anywhere in Europe, whatever, yeah, you're not gonna probably order bourbon. But if you're in America, like the home nation of the bourbon cocktail, ordering bourbon neat makes total sense. Like, oh, I'm in America, bourbon neat.
Well, I also like the guy that he gets it neat, and the guy's like, "That's extra."
Yeah,
yeah,
like that's really funny.
Yeah, he wants it with no ice. That's extra. Yeah, that was it. That was a good gag. I mean, like a good gag in like clearly every black person in Harlem is somehow out to get James Bond. Yeah, that was a fun little bit.
Which I also like that.
I mean, evidence to the contrary, my friend.
Well, I like in that, I don't want to get into like future spoilers, but I like that he asks the guy for information and he gives him like 100, and then when this table spins around, the guy just drinks the bourbon and walks away with $100
he takes
bill.
The money, and then he takes the money and the wall spins. Yeah.
It's like the guy in the cab too, because he gives like the guy in the cab like a fat tip, and he was like, "Oh, thanks, Mister." And then he's like, as soon as he walks in, he goes, "Honk is coming." It's like, oh,
yeah.
Mr. Big's got his paws in everywhere. You can't escape him. He's got.
Yeah,
and that's what I like. Like, he has the whole city on lock, and then you find out it's not even just the city. He has like a country and other cities all on lock, just under his control, and I think that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I love. We'll get into it when we talk about the plot, but I love that there are certain aspects about the Mr. Big villain, and kind of like the. For me, watching it as an adult and like knowing history, particularly like, around the time this film came out, like there are certain aspects of society that play well into Mr. Big's plot and his planning and like how he can do this sort of stuff. So I'm very interested in going over that when we get to that.
Mm-hmm. Up next on the trivia docket, Paul McCartney's iconic theme was the source of some tension between the former Beatle and producer Harry Saltzman. After McCartney submitted the song, Saltzman said he liked it, but asked who's going to sing it. McCartney told producers he'd only sell the song to them if he and his band could perform it. Ultimately, Saltzman relented. It's not every day a Beatle offers to work for you. But the film also includes the soul version of the song at the Filet of Soul. And Saltzman, in keeping with the pettiness of producers, would say he much preferred that version. I mentioned to Logan at some point, I think because we were obviously supposed to record this one a week ago before kind of plans changed. So I've been sitting on this one for like a week and change. And I mentioned to Logan at some point that the combination of like that kind of nonsense and the fact that they were like, we think people are getting too into the gadgets, so we're not going to include Q in this one, was where I basically was like, like the producers on Bond are just fucking morons.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was where like, Logan and I think all of you guys were like, yep, that's welcome to what it's like being a Bond fan.
Because Bond is controlled not by like a single author or team or anything like we have today, but it was done over the course of many, many years by various producers from MGM, a notoriously notoriously on the verge of bankrupt studio for its entirety until it was eventually bought out. So
yeah,
MGM has had problems for years. And so like bad production management is not surprising.
Yeah. Saltzman and Broccoli just like wildly making terrible decisions. Like, it is amazing that the Bond franchise has survived as it has with such like inept leadership at the helm.
That's a really true statement though, because I know you mean it, but when you get to the end of this, you're really gonna feel those words especially because it's like there's so many downsides and so many dumb decisions that get made throughout some of the movies where you're like, man, if we had inept people who actually knew what they were doing at the helm, we could have just had nothing but awesome James Bond movies instead of some of the ones we end up with.
Mm-hmm.
That and like a lot of like the legacy puritanical casting requirements for Bond come from this era of production leadership.
Yeah.
The idea that he has to be British, the idea that he like basically the things that we want to see different about Bond, and people are up in arms about saying, well, that's not the original intention. It's like, well, the original intention was made by a bunch of idiots, so who made consistently terrible decisions. But you can't tell a Bond like a lot of these Bond purists that because they think this is the greatest film franchise of all time and like doesn't have any bad movies in it. Like you meet some of those people sometimes and you're like, wow, you are just so high on copium.
On copium?
Yeah, copium. It's like it's basically saying it's like opium, but for people who are coping. Like people want to cope, and so they come up with all these excuses to cope with something they don't like. It's like the QAnon conspiracy for like conspiracy theorist conservatives to explain the election. Like they get super high on their copium and they won't listen to reason.
I mean, you know what's not a great reference is when the first thing that comes up when I look at copium is a Pepe the Frog meme. So maybe yank that out of the repertoire.
Well, that's the copium. Yeah, I don't know. Pepe had like Twitch streamers are still claiming that they've reclaimed Pepe the Frog. So
they assuredly have not. So,
I don't know.
moving on.
I haven't seen Pepe the Frog at rallies lately. So
finally, speaking of Harry Saltzman, and his financial position was becoming quickly untenable, as kind of alluded here. In 1969, he had borrowed 70 million Swiss francs, approximately $40 million US, from the Union of Bank of Switzerland to help in a takeover of the Technicolor Motion Picture Corporation from its then chairman. By 1972, however, a year before Live and Let Die would come out, Saltzman reportedly had to sell off 370,000 shares of Technicolor stock to repay his Swiss loan. It was also reported that some of Saltzman's former allies had forced him to sell the stock, which they then purchased in an attempt to oust him from the board. Just more and more financial shenanigans and stuff there. And then the last little bit of trivia here. Frequent Bond screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz claims that Technicolor was selling at $30 a share when Saltzman took it over and was at $8 a share by 1972 when he was ousted from the board. Saltzman would ultimately default on the interest of his loans from the Swiss bank. So I don't know how that's like necessarily relevant to the movie, but Logan did bring it in to include it in here.
One of the things this is just not even like a specific thing, so I'll jump into it. But one of the things I thought was cool about this movie was the usage of the tarot cards, and like I kind of even go into Cam's thing about like how it dips more into like the supernatural and the occult, and like now that I have more of a better understanding from like Persona of the like tarot cards and what they mean, like I thought that was a really interesting like plot device to try to put in the movie. Although obviously it goes weird places that I don't like. It's just like I thought that was like a cool addition to have in there. That's another thing you never really get in like Bond movies.
Yeah, I mean, I it was definitely interesting because I feel like I know the most about like the deck of tarot stuff from Persona. From like Cyberpunk has a little bit of it. Like I've gleaned little bits here and there. I wouldn't like if you gave me like, oh, the Fool card or like the Prince of Cups or whatever, Queen of Cups. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't know what those things really actually mean. Like lovers, even whatever it actually means, it doesn't really matter in comparison to how it's used contextually in the film. But like, yeah, if they hadn't said like Queen of Cups means, betrayal or whatever, I would have been like, even when they do say that, I'm like, I'm taking your word for it because I don't really know better. And yeah, I mean, the whole element of like the occult in this movie is definitely like oh, okay, this is interesting. This is not what I expected from a Bond. So, yeah.
But that's why I think it's kind of cool and different, though. And it definitely almost feels a little bit like just inspired of other movies that were happening at the time. But that's why I think it's just fun and interesting. And it really is like you just get in a time machine to go back to this movie. Like this movie was totally set in that era that it was made in. And it just feels that way. But it doesn't feel bad to me, at least. It just feels like interesting to go watch and see all the practical stunts and like even just all the cars driving around on the street, like when they do the shots of just like the outer places and like when he's leaving the airport, like there's just a ton of really cool little things that just make it feel like it's obviously from the era, but I think that's just something cool about the movie.
Yeah.
As somebody who is a little bit more familiar with tarot and the occult, I have not looked into it at all, but I'm pretty sure that like a lot of it's made up that they choose for this movie. I would not be surprised if that was the case. Just because tarot oftentimes is like it is what you want to make of it. Like it's very open ended, and like be like this means definitively this, or this in reverse means this. Like it's never that specific. Like this means betrayal, or like this means this or that, and it's like it's a whole thing. And like using tarot to like figure out the serial number on a watch is just like not realistic.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
That's
at all.
That's just
So,
like
yeah.
that was absolutely just like okay, like I'm giving you a true or false answer. Let's see if you can actually predict if I'm being truthful or not. Yeah, I like as I'm looking up Queen of Cups here at Biddy Tarot, it does say that the reversed Queen of Cups is inner feelings, self-care, self-love, and codependency. So not really betrayal at all. So yeah, I guess apparently Bond is just full of shit. Still manages to like uncover the actual plot of Rosie Carver being like a betrayal to him. But
There's a lot to say about that scene in general too, because there's a lot of like, oh boy,
Yeah,
stuff
no,
about it.
it's that and it's the solitaire thing. Both leave me being like, oof. Like, and that's just like because that's why like I like the tarot setup. I don't like where it goes and like what they do with it. And obviously, yeah, you get into like the weird stuff like that. And then it's the same thing with her, where like they have this whole weird scene with them on that island, and I'm just like that is parts of the movie I don't like and I can't like because that's I know we'll continue to get deeper into it, but it's like the parts of the movie that you don't like, Trevor, I can't like defend and tell you were good or like, oh, you missed it. It's like, yeah, that's the bad part of the movie. Like there are bad parts of the movie. Like I was almost thinking like with talking about it with Logan, like there's just totally things as like my editor brain where I'm like, I would just take this out. I would take this out, take this out, take this out. And we would have like closer to like a 90-minute movie that has like a tight runtime. And we just have a fun James Bond adventure. And like, it's like, I think you could leave a lot of what's there and just chunk entire parts of the movie out and it would probably flow better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I might be controversial in saying that I would definitely label massive parts of the boat chase scene definitely that.
Oh yeah,
no, 100%. Yeah,
I mean that's like in my initial watch, I was talking like I was fine with the movie until we get like the J.W. Pepper character, and that whole sequence is just incredibly long and like routinely was bringing down my enjoyment of the film.
You can only give me so many shots of speedboats on the bayou by themselves and it's just like, but like I don't. This could have been the same as the other 3 times that you've shown this, basically this exact same frame.
Yeah.
I'm confused why it matters at this point. And like, why is this going on for such a long time? And the only thing I can think of is they bought all these speedboats and they need an excuse to explain why they needed all these speedboats.
Sure. Well, Logan is back with us. Welcome back, Logan.
Thank you.
You have survived your hiccups.
Well,
I mean, presumably, I don't know. So we run through all the trivia. I don't know if there was any little extra comments or commentary you wanted to add on to any of them that obviously we didn't have you around for, or if you want to just dive right into the 70-second recap.
I'll give a shout out to Desmond Llewellyn not being in the movie, just because watching all of these back to back to back, like we have, like me and you in particular have, Trev. Yeah, it's a bummer. Even just like some like obligatory appearance, like at a wedding, like in On a Magic Good Service, like makes all the difference. And obviously because he's not in here, there would be a huge fan backlash, and he would make every Bond appearance from here on out until he passed away. So always give Desmond Llewellyn all the love in the world.
Yeah, and it's like, especially because they go through the whole like point of explaining that the gadget is from him, the watch is from him at the beginning. It's like, oh, there's just no reason that he couldn't have also been there making that house call with M and just that, weird, uncomfortable sequence.
I love that sequence. I love that sequence so much.
Like bring back the gadgets to a normal level from where they had been at in the kind of last few films. And you get that in the fact that like the only real gadget in the movie is the watch, right, from Q.
It's sick as hell though.
That watch is so goddamn good though. Man.
It's a
and they use it multiple ways, which like I'd rather have.
I do, but like I think it's fine. I think ultimately it's like a watch, but like it's a cool watch.
I think it fails in that they set up the idea that it can like redirect a bullet, and then they just never
never pay it off.
They never pay that off, and then also it just suddenly has this like buzzsaw feature in it as well at the end that was never introduced. So it's like they kind of like fail on a couple fronts with it. I personally will say I loved like him trying to use the boat or the thing to get the boat, and then the boat's tied up. It's like, well, shit. There goes that idea.
When he looks at the watch like, I cannot believe that you've done this to me. It's such a good.
Because going back to the beginning when they introduce it, I do really love that bit though, where he's like, it can deflect a bullet at close range, and he's like, I'm tempted to find that out. Like he glares, like M just glares at him, and is like, oh, James, like, and that's why that's the part of the movie I love though, and I think this movie does really well. Like, I think it does some of the classic like James Bond stuff with like, even though M and Moneypenny are only in that like beginning, it's like they're great. Felix Leiter's amazing. Like, he's such a good secret agent in this movie too, where he actually does secret agent stuff and like uses his tools. And that's just something I think that's super cool that they kind of set out from the beginning. Although then it's really weird that there isn't a scene with Q, like when he's still just like
Yeah.
it's so weird that they don't set up any of the gadgets, but they routinely bring them up through the movie. Like, you're just supposed to know that they were there. And it's just like your thing where he's like, he just gets the buzzsaw out of nowhere. And I'm like, well, that's where Q could have explained to him that there was a buzzsaw in the thing, or that the shotgun has the pellets that like air compressed. Like, which
What-
like, why does he even need those in the first place? Like, that's such a weird
For the
thing.
shark gun.
Yeah, the shark gun. I did see there was like a deleted scene where he's actually, I think, getting that shark gun from Quarrel.
Yeah.
That
Quarrel
it's something that Quarrel Jr. That
Right.
provided
To
to
that,
him.
yeah.
But yeah, that gets zero setup. So like, it's convenient that they also shot the scene of Kananga shooting the couch to like trap Whisper for a second, because otherwise it would have been like, what does this thing
Ridiculous.
do
Yeah.
for this incredibly ridiculous, villain death at the end? One of the things we touched on that we spent some time, so I'll check to see if you had anything to add there, Logan, was the crocodile stunt scene.
Yep.
Like-
That's exactly what I was going to go to next.
Yeah.
Yep. It's absolutely absurd. It's absolutely mad. In like all the best ways possible. It still is one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever seen on film. That they like, because like, I don't know if any of you guys saw or watched, but like, they actually have like, because he did it on his 6th try, I think, and like they have the other 5 failed attempts where he like falls. It is simply amazing that man was not killed. It is simply amazing. Like, there's one of his like little attempts where like he just straight up like falls into like a crocodile's mouth, basically. Like, it is, I don't like, it's just the craziest stunt I think I might have ever seen in my life. Like, in terms of just like, he just straight up ran over a bunch of crocodiles as like a bridge, and it's really insane to watch like the failures back to back to back, because the crocs at the end, by like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th take, know what's happening, and so like they're ready for him. So like every time he's able to like basically like at one point in time, like one croc literally like rips his shoe off. Like, they're ready for him by the end, and yet they were still just like, you know what? Let's give it one more go. And like, to their credit, that one more go on like the 6th try or whatever, like, it worked, but it is an incredible, like, it is absolutely insane that he did not just get seriously injured. Even more than the stitches he required.
I mean, yeah, it's the idea, like, I mentioned while you were away that like, I didn't know that, like, I just assumed it was like fake crocodiles or something like that. In the the second that it's happening on screen or whatever, like, I just assumed it was like a fake thing that they did, and it wasn't until reading the trivia afterwards that I realized that it was a real stunt. And so yeah, it's like, oh yeah, like that 6th attempt could have easily gone the other way, and this guy just dies on a production of Bond, and the Bond series ends up paying out insurance or something to that guy, and just we never get another Bond movie.
Yeah, it is such a weird, like, and like,
I'm just kidding.
really...
That never would have happened, clearly, based on the other like financial problems that the Saltzmans and Broccoli's
and
clearly had.
like, and that was the other big one I wanted to get to too. Like, this, we've talked about it a couple times, like, this really being where you're going to kind of see the seeds of where Harry Saltzman is going to kind of break off because of his increasing financial troubles. One thing I didn't include in the trivia here that I'll include next week for A Man with the Golden Gun is the fact that, like, by this point in time, Broccoli and Saltzman are essentially barely on speaking terms, and have like basically gotten into the habit of like each is producing their own movie, right? So like, one is producing Live and Let Die, and the other one's kind of just like off to the side, and then like the next one does the next movie, and the next one does the next movie. Like, they're essentially trading off Bond movies at this point in time. Like, again, like, all this is really just deteriorating, and that's why I sort of included it with the Sean Connery stuff, where you see, I think, the deterioration of his relationship with both of them, and then with him out of the picture, instead of it being like, oh, happy days, they kind of like turn on each other a little bit. And I think Saltzman sort of resents the fact that increasingly Broccoli is more and more and more the front man, because he kind of has his shit together. And I think Saltzman kind of resents the fact that like he is being treated as the younger brother who can't kind of get his house in order. Because in his mind, he was the one who kind of made the first overtures, and now like the tables kind of turned. And that'll really come to a head next week, where it is just a complete disintegration of a relationship, like on no speaking terms at all. But it is very much present here as well. And so I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that aspect of it. Also, Paul McCartney's music is great, and I'm so glad Harry Saltzman was talked into including Live and Let Die in the movie, because it's fucking phenomenal, as Frank said. It's an incredible piece of music. But yes, we can do the 0070 second recap.
Do we want to take? Right. So, like, what I've enjoyed doing the last couple of times, and I'll open this up to Cameron and Frank, is taking kind of like guesses on how long it's actually going to take Logan to read through this.
I timed this one. It should be pretty close to like 70-80 second range. It's gonna be a close one.
I was gonna say I think based on what you've got written here, I'm seeing 80. I'm gonna say 82 seconds.
I'm gonna say a full 90. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. You can have that. I'll go 89.
These guys are rookies. This is their first.
No, you can't just go 80. Don't
Trevor.
$1 me, Frank. You asshole.
$1, Bob.
I will actually come under, and I'll say 78 seconds. There we go.
All right. It's all to you, Logan. Hit us.
James is woken in the middle of the night by M with the news that 3 agents have been killed in the past few days. After showing off his espresso machine, Bond says "Chow to Moneypenny" and heads out to Harlem. There, Bond's driver falls asleep at the wheel, we meet Felix, and Bond goes to the Filet of Soul and meets Mr. Big. After getting rescued by Struthers, Bond heads to San Monique, meets both Whisper and Rosie Carver, gets a nice shave and a lightning-quick bath, and then buys a pack of cards. Afterwards, we meet Coral Jr. and Rosie, who is a bad spy, and is also revealed to be a bad guy, and pretty bad at that too. Bond pulls a card trick on Solitaire, and then they go for a walk in some poppy fields together, before off to New Orleans we go. They get captured immediately, which allows Bond to give a flying lesson to Miss Bell. Struthers is killed, Bond is captured at the Filet of Soul again, and Mr. Big reveals he is Kananga and wants to flood the heroin market. Bond hops some Crocs, goes on a longboat chase through the swamps, and then rescues Solitaire from Baron Samedi, blows the poppy fields with the help of Coral Jr., before taking care of Kananga's inflated ego. Finally, Bond and Solitaire take a nice train ride together, before Bond tosses Tee-Hee overboard, and we're left with the image of Baron Samedi laughing as the credits roll.
All right. What did you have, Cameron? You had 78, right?
I had 78, yeah.
It was 76, so I'm going to give that to you.
90 seconds. You guys are really rookies. Yeah, you were going way overboard.
I read through it, and I was like, I think he could do it under 80 if he actually
happy.
doesn't get any interruptions. So
I was pretty happy.
I held my tongue.
It's there've been a couple times where Logan has like thrown in like a quip here or there that wasn't in the script, so I was kind of anticipating a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, also I was only 4 seconds off, or 6.
Yeah,
6. I was 6 seconds off. You were 2 seconds off. So you know, but good job, Logan.
Thank you. Trevor, how many were killed?
We will now that it is not just you taking bets on this. I have kind of named characters, and then I have kind of his total kill count. So does anybody want to take guesses on either or? And this, like, you can like double up, and you don't have to, like, people can have the same guess on this one.
I want to say, I'm kind of shooting a little bit in the dark, but I want to say like 4. No, I want to say 5, but I'm going to say 4. But it's because I don't remember him killing that many people in this movie. Like, I only really remember him. Well, I guess he technically does kill Kananga and Tee-Hee. So that's 2. Okay.
That's 2 guaranteed.
Yeah. And then he kills the guy on the boat.
Yeah.
But that's about it from what I can think of. Like, this isn't a super actiony violent one.
The action, a lot of the action is like scenic action. It's not like intense physical action. I'll go ahead and say, I want to say 5.
Okay.
Because he doesn't kill the guys in Harlem, does he?
No.
It's Struthers who kills the guys in Harlem. So.
And Logan?
Yeah. So, I think, and I'm on a bit of a good roll here. I've got the last 3 right. I think that Bond, Frank is sort of correct, does not kill a lot of people. And we're mainly focused on the named characters. It's sort of the ones we've been keeping track of, really.
Mm-hmm.
And here he cures Kananga. He kills Teehee. He doesn't kill Whisper. He's just trapped in a fucking footlocker. Obviously, the weirdest one for me that I'm sure you're going to have some fun with, Trevor, is like, what is the status of the Baron? Because like he kills him and then also he's at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I consider Baron alive. I'm just saying. He seems like he's very much
alive. I
alive.
also consider Baron alive. I'm sure there's going to be some weird bullshit of that, but like I am going to consider him alive as well because he's at the end of the movie.
Then his death, he was thrown into a case full of snakes. Mm-hmm. And that's like, you never see him get bit. He could easily pretend to have been killed.
I think.
And then gotten away, like,
I think the insinuation is that he did get bit and died and is also just magical.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely what the movie is kind of like alluding to is he dies there, but he's also this weird immortal thing.
So outside of that, Bond doesn't kill anyone in the pre-credits because he's not there. Mm-hmm. He doesn't kill anyone in New York City because the 2 henchmen that walk him out of the club, he just knocks a ladder on, basically. Struthers is there to like save the day from that point onwards. He doesn't kill any of the drivers. He kills the guy in the boat, but I don't remember that man having a name. I don't remember him having a name. So like he's an important henchman. He's there a lot, but like I don't remember his name at all. And then I don't think he kills any other named characters. So really the question is, what am I thinking about Baron? And do I think that one guy who's in the movie a lot has an actual name? Ultimately, I am saying the Baron is still alive, and ultimately, I'm saying the guy who's in the movie a lot but doesn't have a name doesn't have a name. So I'm going to say the named characters he kills are 2, Kananga and Teehee. That's my final guess.
So the full breakdown here. And this
can I say 3 because he didn't say Mr. Big? I'm joking.
Yeah, Kananga and Big are one and the same.
I know.
So pulling this from All Out of Bubblegum, where I've been pulling the last few from, this body count breakdown is from user AshPD24.
So we can send all the hate mail there if we disagree.
There you go. So yes, no Bond killings in the opening. Although I will point out, like I will say I was amused by Agent Dawes is electrocuted by an assassin in New York, because I would not have taken what happens in the New York scene as an electrocution.
No, I wouldn't have either.
I was like, I would have just assumed that was like, oh, somehow like some kind of sonic thing killed this guy. Yeah. So there's contention on this. It doesn't really apply because this is, we're looking at named characters, but when Bond is in New Orleans, the taxi guy does specifically say, "You killed one of our brothers in Harlem." So there is one body counted among the 2 thugs that he hits, namely the thug he hits with the fire escape. They count as a kill.
That guy's not dead. He's got a concussion, maybe. Or that guy got hit by a...
There is dialogue to suggest that it was a fatal blow.
What you didn't know, Logan, is that guy already had existing preconditioned neck issues.
There you go. Yeah, that guy.
And a compound fracture on his neck did in fact cause his his trachea to collapse, and he suffocated to death.
The boat chase, the henchman, the frequently appearing henchman is named Adam. So
that's true.
He is included in this count. The snake charmer guy character is named.
He's got a name.
Is named right. Dambala.
Yep, you're totally right.
And Bond shoots him, as well as another thug in that freeing of solitaire.
Sure.
And then he shoots a statue of Baron Samedi, and then he pushes Baron Samedi into the snake pit, which which is counted as a kill here. And because we are playing with the idea of like, oh, is he supernatural? He can die and is still somehow also alive at the end of the movie. But that's also just absurdity. They do count Whisper as a kill.
He's not
arguing that Whisper's breathing problem would mean he would asphyxiate in that airtight.
Oh, that's true.
Case.
Who's coming to pick him up? Yeah, who's coming to pick Whisper up?
that was my thing, is if nobody goes back down there to get him and nobody knows that's how they were getting that stuff out of there, that was the plan. Like, he is just going to suffocate down there.
There are other Kananga henchmen there. That's a boo. It's all irrelevant. I don't get it for the snake charmer guy alone, but like Whisper is totally fine. He's just in a fucking footlock. He's fine.
But yes, then as we've already identified, Kananga with the shark pellet and Teehee off the train. I will highlight here, in the unconfirmed and uncounted section that they have here, they suggest that CIA agent Harold Strutter is very heavily implied dead, but is never seen. But yeah, obviously we see the same celebration sequence.
That dude
that highly implies that he absolutely
he did.
Strutter, he's dead for sure, 100%.
There's also an unconfirmed number of people that may have been alive, in the fire at the farm. Same as in the heroin fields that get blown up. Bond, when he hang glides in, he kicks a thug off the rock, and it's unknown if that would be a fatal blow or if he would have fallen into the water below or something.
That guy's dead.
I think he's dead because otherwise, Bond would not have had 3 lovemaking sessions with Solitaire, right?
I mean, I'm saying the guy could have fallen into the water and then just had a hell of a time getting out and getting back to anybody to talk to stuff. But yes. So the overall count that this breakdown had is 6 named characters and 8 overall, with the couple of henchmen that he killed.
I disagree with that, but it is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I won. I had 5, right?
I mean, it's not, this one isn't a closest. It's you get the point if you
got to get it right.
If you get the number of accurate. I don't know if I would have without reading this. I definitely wouldn't have I wouldn't have thought to consider one of the henchmen, but especially I did go back and watch the movie a second time, and yep, it is in the area of dialogue of they say yeah, you killed one of our brothers in Harlem. It's did he though? But then and I also wouldn't have caught the name of Adam or Dumbala.
Yeah.
So my guess, my guess would have been 3 with Baron, Samedi, Kananga, and Teehee, because I also wouldn't have immediately gone to Whisper is dead. But anyway,
but that was a debate I had in my head when I was thinking of it, though, because I was I swear, Logan's right. There are other henchmen there, but I'm who's gonna come down there and just be opening containers?
Yeah,
especially after your boss is fired, everyone's going home getting unemployment. They want out of there.
Yeah. Anyway,
they need to get out of there before the local residents realize that they've been subjected to cult work, subjected to cult brainwashing, techniques, and murder all the workers, where the workers murder all the henchmen. They got to get out of there, because sooner or later, the workers are going to figure out, hey, this wasn't real, and then they're coming for you.
Yeah.
I think that it is only 3, but Adam to me strikes me as a character who again I would watch it again, I guess, but strikes me as a character who I wonder if his name is actually said in the movie, or if it's just included in the credits.
It's said in the movie. I remember it being said in the movie, because I'm pretty sure.
I never remember hearing Adam in this movie, but I will acknowledge it could have been said, but it seems like one that would have been a credit one.
It's said when Teehee has Bond and they're on their because Adam's the driver, and then he's also there's other things that he's instructed.
Adam Driver.
Adam, there you go, Adam Driver.
But
nice.
Irrelevant. That is the how many killed. Now we're into the recap, and we will start with Trevor, because I think he's got... Well, no, fuck you, Trevor. We're going to start with Frank. We're going to go some positive, and then we're going to bring it negative. Frank, what did you feel about Live and Let Die?
Yeah. So I think I already said a couple things, but I did really like this movie. I like the style. I like the vibe of it. I do like the gadgets, and I do think that when they do make a concerted effort to make the Bond more different than Connery was, but I still feel like the things that they kept the same, they actually just nailed. I feel like they're just so good at making a Bond movie at this point that I again Moneypenny and M and Felix Leiter, and I love all of them and all the interactions, and I love that always love the relationship between Felix and James, and especially in this one, it's so funny where Felix is always just like his keeper and having to like pick up after him. And even when after the boat chase is way too long, but when he pulls in at the end and Felix is just standing there with like a bunch of cops on the dock, like shaking his head, like that's so funny to me. Like, and it's just one of those like just funny things that like doesn't, you don't even have to have like a conversation or a quip or anything. That's just a very funny like visual gag because you know the characters at this point. And I like so much of just what they're able to do with, like, I think the movie's really clever. I think it's really funny. Like, it did make me still laugh a couple times. And like, it is obviously we're getting into that really campy like territory where the more movies are just going to continue that trend and kind of get crazier. But it is like, I think it works well here where it is like actiony in some parts, and then it's like more intense and low key in other parts. And then some parts it just goes for like full comedy with like actual, some funny jokes, even with like the Felix lighter bit where Felix is like in the car like lighter, and then he more has that line where he's like, oh, a genuine Felix lighter. Like, and it's just like the little communication piece back to him. Like, I love all these dumb little jokes. And even when one that I like that Logan and I talked about earlier is when Felix is on the phone with the guy from the airplane place, like the guy who runs the flight school, and he's like, it's just everything that Felix says in that scene is so funny. Even when he's like, yeah, no sir, nobody doubts your veteran status, sir. Like, and he's just like, and then he's like, no sir, you don't have to use that language. Like, and it's just like this guy is like irate at like Bond, and like that's just some of the fun moments that I think really like keep the movie and highlight it and boost it up. Although like there are bad parts of the movie, it is a little bit too long. There's some scenes that just take way too long, and that's why I think like if you could go in with like a editing tool now and really trim it back and keep a lot of what's there, but just shorten a lot of it, and like that 20-minute boat chase, I would make like 5 minutes, and you could still keep all of the core components, even part of JW, which I would cut him out of the whole movie entirely. But like you could even keep like a snippet of him in there and still have the same effect. He doesn't need all the screen time that he gets. But yeah, I don't want to drone on too much. But last thing I want to throw in there is I do just love all the practical effects and how real everything is. Like I kind of was talking a bit when you were gone that like this movie's like a weird time capsule of it. Like it is just totally the era it was made in, even from the cars on the street to like the Pan Am at the airport and like all that stuff. But it makes the movie just so awesome to me that it is just like a vibe. And I also really love the back and forth of like I love Kananga, and I think he's a really good villain. And I love the back and forth of like in the beginning of the movie, it's like Felix and the Americans are like, no, we got him. Like we've been following him, listening to him. We got his rooms tapped, everything. Then it shows you Kananga, and Kananga's on top of them. Like he's ahead. And then it's like, no, I have this recording. I'm going to like flip and play. And they think I'm in the room, but we're going to go do crime somewhere else. And then Bond then figures that out and is like, and that's why it's a back and forth the entire time. It's not just like a one and done. And one of the other things I love about Kananga too is that, like Logan and I talked about earlier, is like the first time he meets Bond, he doesn't sit down and have like exposition. He tells his guys, kill this guy now. Like he's like, kill him, and he walks away. Like, and that's when I'm like Kananga, I think, is a really good villain. And I also always like looking at the villain's plan. And I think Kananga had a good plan that would have worked if Bond didn't get involved. Like this is one of those, like if Bond didn't do anything or if he failed, like Kananga could have had this like crazy plan that probably would have worked. Just like Goldfinger, where like Goldfinger's a plan that could work and like put somebody in a powerful position. So like I think that's pretty cool, because even if you maybe haven't gotten there yet, there's some Bond dudes that have the worst plans ever, just like the dude from Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah. like his plan just would have failed by itself without any intervention from anyone else anyways, because then the internet happened.
Yeah. Cameron, what are your thoughts on the movie?
Man, I love this movie so much. It's one of my old school favorite Bond films as a kid. Just because there is something really fantastic about, like, there's something really great about it's Roger Moore's first time, and he just nails the Bond character so well on so many aspects of it. As somebody who's like a long time Connery like apologist, like saying Connery is the best, for so many years. I like as an adult, I see Roger Moore in like his earlier films as being just such like moments that I thought that when I was younger, I falsely attributed to Connery. Rewatching it as an adult, realized, oh, these are actually Roger Moore moments. And something I just dearly loved about this movie is, one, Jane Seymour. Like, a Solitaire is as a character, has serious problems with it, but man, I love Jane Seymour in this role in this movie. She is like, there's something so like early moments of like awakening, like sexual and romantic awakening, like Jane Seymour as Solitaire takes it, because it's this whole like, from the moment she comes down and Bond is in the shroud and he's like flipping through the cards, and she immediately takes great offense to that. Like how dare you? Like, this isn't like something that's very important to me. And he like brushes it off, being like, "Oh, my bad, dear. I had no idea." And then it's just like, but it's great because it's a play into, like, he plays into the concept and idea of the lover's card as something that he saw like earlier in her deck when she was going through it with him and Harlem. And it's just like that entire like just, there's a whole lot of problems with Solitaire's character. Like,
we'll get to it. Don't worry.
With the whole like virgin aspect of it. But what it does really well is it plays into this, like, I like her as the Bond girl eventually, like the eventual Bond girl. Because I totally thought she was going to be like, even especially when I was younger, I totally thought she was going to be like this creepy, like psychic menace to Bond throughout the film. And so, yeah, other things I love about this film are I love the villain. Like, the villain is so good. It's really incredible to me when I look back on it. Like, as when I was younger, I loved him because he, as a kid, I didn't know anything about, like, I had no idea anything about makeup or anything, you know, being a 7-8-year-old kid. And so when Mr. Big tears off his face and reveals Kananga underneath, for me, it's, as a kid, it was such a like a moment.
That
like
shit's
that,
awesome.
Like,
Yeah, it's so
oh my
awesome.
gosh. And it's like, it's done so well because Mr. Big like has one of the best villain lines in all of Bond. In all the Bond movies, he has one of the best lines ever, which is when he goes, Bond, he stops, he says, "Names are for tombstones."
Me
Take
and Frank
him out.
talked about this at lunch for like 5 minutes, probably. That
Take
whole
him
scene.
out,
It's great.
like, take him out back and waste
him. Yep.
Like, such an iconic moment for a character who then is revealed to actually be, in disguise, this well put together diplomat and prime minister character that we've seen in other places. And I love that aspect of this duality of playing into expectation. Like, and this is one of the things I really, really ended up loving about this movie is it plays with the expectations of the time. The expectations of the time is you would expect a big heroin boss named Mr. Big to be from Harlem, to like to have that classic 70s blaxploitation ebonics accent and way of speaking, and he plays directly into that. And then it's like Frank said when I think we were off air at the time. His plan is he has the entire country on lock, and a big part of that is you see multiple scenes where there is essentially like black side characters, black background actors who make up the help and staff of just about every place everybody is. And as an adult rewatching it this time, I made the realization, it's like, you know, where is the best place to put your people in to make sure you have an ear in and nobody will second guess a black person in that role? It's going to be in these, you know, the like Whisper comes in as a waiter, like as a hotel attendant, and Bond never gives him a second look. He never gives him a second, like, questioning glance, anything. Even though he's in enemy territory, he should be paying attention to it. He doesn't pay attention to Whisper as anything other than the guy who's bringing him the champagne. And I love that they play directly into that as, like, yeah, you, like, and, like, you can now today, looking back at it through a lens of, like, criticism, you can be like, well, was that racism? Is that actual racism being applied? But like that was the racism of the time even. And I love that, I love that Frank said this is a period piece. It plays directly into being a representation of the era that this movie was filmed, shot, and released in. And there's something about that I find both very authentic and at the same time, like, it was also like groundbreaking. Bond, one of the Bond girls being black, which had, I have no doubt, had significant backlash because we didn't see it for
30 years.
30 years.
Until Die Another Day.
Yeah. but like it was like there are so many moments of this movie that are like groundbreaking in because it's like, guess what, Mr. Big has one Mr. Big has one of the most airtight, sure plans to find success. And not only that, but he's also at the same time, I love the hints about the mob. They never say the mob outright. They never say the mafia directly.
Yeah.
But like the reference to won't your Italian neighbors feel upset about this? And he like makes the total point of being like, when you control the supply, and like the supplier and the dealers, like you are both, you have full control of that market. And if you can, like, he can really flood the market to no detriment until he controls it. And like, it's a vicious cutthroat plan that does attack that, like, and it you could definitely be like, well, doesn't that attack communities of color? It's like, totally. It totally does. He doesn't care. This is not somebody who's doing it for a like self-righteous reason. He is purely thinking about what he can do to gain profit and control a entire like avenue of business. And the way that he does that is just, it's so great. I love his confidence, especially at the end. It's like, oh, brother, we found your wetsuit. Like, and like, just the confidence that he has is so, it honestly actually feels well earned. A lot of other Bond villains, when they do their Bond monologue at the end of the film, it's not well earned. Like, you haven't actually, like, your plan is dumb. B, James has already set up a way to stop it. But no, like, his plan is so good that even though Bond has burned down one of his labs, even though like he says the poppy is a resilient plant. Basically being like, yeah, you've done this now, but I can just replant it. It's not a problem. I still have control. Like, the avenues of feeling of control that he has in this and throughout the entire film. And yet, is it like the inflated like self-ego? Like, is that it? Or is it just like Mr. Big is that damn good? And I think it plays into both of those. So I really love him as it. I will give a massive shout out to Roger Moore as James Bond, just from the get-go. He's coming back from a mission, so he has a pseudo Bond girl at the beginning of the film. And let me go ahead and distract my boss who's in my home, who's now asking me about this missing Italian agent. And like, you know, it's such like, I love the play of keeping M distracted and Moneypenny helping James out. Like, it immediately establishes their like everybody's relationship. Yeah. And could we have used M there, or could we have used Q? Thank you. Q there to help us like establish that relationship? Yes. But at the same time, is Q getting out of his bed at 5:30 in the morning to deliver a watch? Yes, is the answer. The answer is probably supposed to be yes, but it's believable that it's a no. Because Q has more important things to do than deliver James some jewelry. That's true. I could totally see that line being given there.
Because he's also the quartermaster for everyone. It's not just James. Like, it's for all of MI6. Like, I'm sure he's crazy busy, but I know they didn't put that much into it, probably.
Yeah, no, they wanted to separate it from the other Bond films. But yeah, that's just a. Also, I want to give a massive shout out to Teehee. Teehee being this like imposing, vicious criminal and cutthroat villain who at any given time has something that can just annihilate you, but he wears this like gleeful grin and like laughs all the time. I love it. I just love it.
Trevor, what were your thoughts on Live and Let Die?
I mean, I think I like it more than you think I did.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, because I do like a lot of it. Yeah, a lot of it is absolutely fucking stupid, and I absolutely hate everything around the J.W. Pepper stuff. Yep. Like there's no saving any of that.
Peg that from a mile away.
Like the one good moment is when a boat just destroys his car, and I'm like, great, the guy got his fucking comeuppance. Why are we spending another 20 minutes with him? Yeah. Like,
why is he being portrayed as like a good guy in this chase? He's not. He's like a monstrous asshole racist.
Yeah. So like that was a problem. I mostly like Kananga. I like in part because of like how he's set up. Like he is set up before we meet Mr. Big as like he is sneaking away. And so the fact that both of his henchmen are there, like I was not at all surprised by the Mr. Big reveal. Like I got it in that moment. Like to their credit, they don't keep him around long enough so a more unassuming audience that is just going to, that hasn't spent, 20 years doing like theater and film theory and analysis or whatever, might not have pieced it together. I wish that the actual reveal of him later on had used a better take of like the him ripping his mask off, because like when he pulls the mask off, it only kind of comes off at the nose at first and he has to like peel away at more of it. Like I wish it had been a larger piece to be a more jarring reveal in that moment. But also in that moment, he could have very easily killed Bond there, doesn't, and so he's hoisted by his own petard at the end, of course. So like I don't think he earns his villain. I guess he earns like that villain exposition, but like in his lair later on, I think like he should just absolutely being like, I thought I've killed you already enough, I'm just going to finish the job now, and instead he gets blown up, quite literally.
But then he wouldn't have got the explanation of what the bullets were for the gun.
Oh no! However, would he have survived? I will say that like I'm very torn on the blaxploitation element of the film. Because obviously, it was very much the vibe of the time, and it is to a degree, it is doing a lot to kind of advance certain aspects of the film, in that you have a largely black cast, both in kind of the henchmen and then also in a lot of the side characters and extras, and obviously all of the Harlem stuff, but like I'm also acutely aware that a couple of stupid rich white guys are at the top of this, making all their money off of the work of all those other people, versus like stuff like Shaft or something, where I feel like there was more black ownership behind some of those projects, and especially a lot of the real blaxploitation kind of era was less white hands involved and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of that. All of like the voodoo stuff is very like icky kind of, in terms of like portrayal elements. So it's like it's a very mixed bag in that aspect. And I one of my earliest notes was when we see Solitaire in Mr. Big's club, I was like, is she in blackface? Because she's a lot more tan than we see her throughout a lot of the rest of the movie, and she's got like very like kind of done up gold eyelash or like eye makeup and stuff like that. So like she looks like she was almost in brown face. I'm like, why is Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman in brown face? Was I think the note I actually took. And it doesn't help that I then go immediately see kind of like, originally they wanted like Diana Ross for that role, in some of the casting kind of conversations, but that loses out because of the race relations of the time. Seeing that the movie was banned in South Africa at the time because of apartheid, and you can't have Bond with Rosie Carver, is like I definitely when he got with Rosie Carver, I was like, I bet this made a bunch of racists mad. Good. Oh yeah, fuck them.
Well, that's why they had to keep the sergeant in there later to make the racists feel better.
It's
Yeah, I mean,
like
I could have done without all of that though.
Oh, 100%.
And I'm already, I'd already looked ahead, and I'm already mad that he's going to be back next week.
Oh man, I'm sad you had that spoiled for you, because I just wanted you to turn on the movie, and when he shows up, just be so upset.
I will still be upset because of how shoehorned he is into the movie, but yeah.
If it makes you feel worse, he's even worse next week. Like,
if he's also in a foreign country where his racism is just adds an extra layer of entitlement to it. Great. I can't wait. JW Pepper.
His like weird, like overtly everything in this movie is, I would go as far to say it is subtle compared to what we will get next week.
Cool.
It is pretty, like, again, because like I've already watched Man the Golden Gun. That was like the first movie I watched when I got the box to just like put on like a C tier Bond movie. And I got to his shit and it's like, they're just straight up saying racist shit. Like, they're just like throwing out like slurs in this movie from J.D. Pepper. And I was like, holy shit. Like, whereas this movie, it's at least somewhat more mild. He's, I will say, thankfully in it less. But it makes his appearance that much more jarring.
I just to end on a like higher note. Apart from maybe Bond and Tracy from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I think the Bond and Solitaire relationship, as questionable as it is in terms of like how old is she versus and whatever with her like virginity kind of at play, like I think there's at least like a building and a foundation of that relationship as opposed to so many other Bond flings that we end up seeing where like it's just they don't even bother trying to like explain how like or why these people are enamored with him or any of that stuff. So like they at least there's at least a sexual tension built up between them that then gets resolved versus, you know, I mean, even in the Rosie example in this movie, it's just like that. I mean, like doesn't really get justified apart from like, oh, Roger Moore's charming, I guess. It's like, okay, but she also was told to expect this and be prepared for this from Felix or from Kananga,
Felix, yeah.
who she's really secretly working for. It's like, okay, whichever side, who cares? She was given the tip and then still like succumbs anyway or whatever. It's like, all right, no, I pass on a lot of that, you know, aspect of it. But the Solitaire one is like, it is kind of like it's set up. They have, you know, flirtation in Harlem. They have flirtation like when he like kind of returns to her and when he continually kind of sees her throughout the film, that like it's at least more justified than we normally get. So that was one of the you know, better, I think, performing aspects of the film for me as well.
It's interesting. My take on, I'm so glad we all have such interesting opinions on this movie. I'm in the minority apparently. I think Solitaire is easily the weakest part of this movie. I think her character never works. I think she, to me, is a lot more reminiscent of Honey Rider or Tanya, who, you know, I think Solitaire has the potential to be really interesting, and I think pretty much every moment up until she and Bond actually sleep together, there's a lot that I find interesting about this dynamic and about her character and like her conflicting loyalties, like, oh, what side will she actually end up going on kind of thing. And then I almost feel like they made her sleep with Bond too early because basically the rest of the movie, which is 2/3 of the movie probably, after that point, I think she's just there to be pretty, basically. I think she doesn't really grow any longer. Like, I think she very quickly becomes Tanya.
Well, I think that's because a good third of that, like, last 2/3 is a boat chase.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So thank you, Cameron, for being on that page with me. But yeah, I mean, I will also see that point of,
sure,
like, as soon as they sleep together, it's not great that she just becomes a damsel in distress for the rest of the movie. And she loses her power. She loses what makes her her, whatever. It's like, oh, that's not a great look. But so my appreciation for her is much more in the buildup of it.
Sure.
Maybe could have been even better if it had been like longer served.
She ultimately is better than I think Honey, who, as we've talked before, I think is crazy overrated, and Tanya. But like I would still have her below like Pussy Galore and Tracy, who I think are just like strong Bond girls in their own right. And so like her character just never really works for me. Outside of that though, I really do love Live and Let Die. If anything, it sounds like less than Cam does, and possibly Frank. Which I'm surprised to see, like, I actually might like it the third most. I think Live and Let Die is great. I think it's a ton of fun. Like I said at the top of the show, I think it is in some ways a like spiritual sequel to Goldfinger. I think in terms of this sense of fun, and it's just well paced for most of the movie. We'll get to that, right? But like I think up until that last act, it is so well paced, and you're moving at such a good like speed, and characters get introduced, and it's just got such a fun energy to it. That like probably 30 minutes into this movie, I was like, oh damn, this is so much of Goldfinger's energy and so much of what makes that movie special, I think. And like in the end, it falters where I think Goldfinger doesn't. I think the other big point of contention is I am pretty surprised at how much some of you like Kananga and Mr. Big. I think I think he's totally good. Like
Okay.
I would not say he is like fantastic or great, which is another issue of like I think why ultimately Goldfinger's stronger, right? Is that I think that villain Goldfinger is just throughout that entire movie, just from literally almost the start to the end, is a recurring feature. He's there, pops up multiple times, has a big imprint on that film. And Kananga is much more sporadic. He lets his henchmen pop up in a lot more scenes, right? Like he's not necessarily dominating everything.
But you're saying he's not a micromanaging boss like Goldfinger was.
Sure, but that allows Goldfinger to really shine, right? And like I think Kananga's good, right? Like I really love the scene of him revealing like that, like Mr. Big revealing that he's Kananga. And actually, to disagree with Trevor's point a little bit, I like the fact that it isn't his whole mask off in one go, because I always find it creepier that it's just like him ripping his nose off and there's like this other like kind of, and he's like doing it in chunks and it's like way more like freakish that way almost.
Oh yeah, I don't want it like I don't want it to be like full like, oh, he just takes the Michael Myers mask or something off, but I just wanted it to be more than just the like I liked the intention of that sequence. I just wish they'd used a better take of it that got more of the mask ripped away so you saw more of him underneath. Yeah.
Like a great way they could have done it is if he'd gotten it from the eye and then it clawed over, took off some of the nose and cheek, I think.
And so like, yeah, like I think that's a whole great scene. And I think that whole dynamic between him and Bond in the chair and like Solitaire and like all of the interplay of those emotions like are really, really cool, right? Like, and it does give you a good Kananga Solitaire scene, I think, even of like, you know, him trying to have her get the right answer, like giving, like you said, like giving you so many clues to get it right and you still were wrong, right? Like I like all the interplay there. And I actually like the fact that at the end of the movie in the base, because that's really only like the second or third time we've really had Bond and Kananga together. Like it is almost like a Jekyll and Hyde version of Kananga. Like he's way more unhinged and like larger than life at the end, and it's kind of fantastic. Like he's playing such a crazy version of that character at the end scene in the cave with Bond, and I love it. Like it is easily my favorite sequence of Kananga in the film. I just think outside of that, we get a lot of him having to be a mild-mannered PM, right, of a like small Caribbean country. And Mr. Big is just kind of a like ridiculous 1970s blaxploitation like villain kind of character, right? And like there's just not enough of him. And so like in the end, I think he's good, right? Like I don't want to say like he's a bad Bond villain. He's by no means isn't. But I think, you know, the Sean Connery era has so many good Bond villains, I think, that he kind of has to deal with that a little bit, right? With, you know, the trio of Blofelds we've just witnessed on this series, or Goldfinger, right? That I love so much that I think he's sort of somewhere in the middle of what we've seen so far in villains. That said, like, I think if anything, Kananga is a pretty good example of like the henchman being better than the villain. Right? Like, I think Teehee is great, even if he is just like a prototype of what Jaws will be. I think that Whisper, I always find completely ridiculous. And like, it always skates the line of like, is this too absurd or is it just really funny? And like, I'm mostly like, it's really fucking funny. Like the scene of like him delivering the champagne and like Whisper yelling to like Bond in the bathroom is like never not humorous to me. And then like obviously Baron Samedi is fantastic. Like he's just iconic and great and like weird and creepy and unnerving and like
what makes him great is the thing.
For me it's when he shows up without all the theatrics,
playing the flute,
and he's playing the flute.
Yeah.
Well, when he shows up and he's just like playing the flute, but he's also toying with it because it's like Baron Samedi already knows for sure that she doesn't have her power. And as somebody who's also on that other side of the supernatural, toying with her and taunting her, is just like, I love those moments like when he's just dressed to the nines and like without the makeup or anything, and he's just so like he's so tall and he's so intimidating, and it's just. And
when he burns the tarot cards, when he just like picks them up and like starts burning them, and I'm like, oh, Baron, you're so
like
fucking cool.
He's so
rad.
He's so just like playing, like hamming it up on the set dressing, during this like intense moment for Solitaire, and Kananga, and I love that aspect of it. It's just for me, it's fantastic.
He has a sweet laugh too. Like it's just
his
like that
so
deep,
good.
like you know, like it's so good.
It's haunting, is what it is. He's a very haunting figure and character throughout the film, and because he's not treated like a henchman, he like there's something different about Baron Samedi. And like when he oh my gosh, when he shows up at the graveyard, like and just like is just like taunt, like it's like he knows, like it just feels like he knows throughout the entire thing. I do want to mention about why Kananga feels a bit more unhinged. I always felt that was more of, we are now seeing that Mr. Big and Kananga, as we've seen throughout the film, are two sides of his of his personality.
Kind of thing.
And when we get it merged into a single person, we get Kananga in the end, who is a bit more like, I don't want to say slapstick, but a bit more loose and easier going than Kananga was, like he was with as being Mr. Big. And then he just like, he does have like, I just feel like he has such a commanding presence in that moment where it does feel like, oh, Kananga's won. Even though like, cause he even flat out says like, I don't care about like having to replant poppies. Like I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to win in the end.
So I liked the henchman in the movie, and like I want to touch on something Frank said. I literally like was writing down notes from like when Frank and Cam were going, and like Frank has one of my favorite descriptions of the entire movie, which is just like it's got such a vibe. It's got such a vibe in this movie. It's so cool. Like that, I think, is such a like crucial ingredient of a great Bond movie, and one that I think, you know, even when his movies were, you know, messy and not the best at times, like even in some of his weaker entries, Sean Connery was just always, he just exudes cool, right? Like Sean Connery is just a cool person. And I think this movie has a similar cool energy, and it's coming both from Roger Moore, but also from the larger world around him. Like it's just a really cool energy and vibe to Live and Let Die that is so unique and so different from, especially from coming from Diamonds Are Forever. This is a very different movie made by the same man, which is incredible. Guy Hamilton is a very interesting person. Yeah, like it's got such a great vibe, and like the early 70s aesthetic is great. Like getting to be in different locations than we pretty much are ever in a Bond movie. Like we're never going back to Harlem. Like we don't really ever go back to New Orleans.
I mean, I was gonna say like when we started this, I definitely didn't have on my bingo card that there was going to be a Bond, like a you know uptight Bond in 70s Harlem, which I will also point out. I think one of the things that does like this movie more than maybe any of the other ones we've watched just highlights Bond isn't a great spy. Bond is not like Bond is sticking out like a sore thumb, completely out of his element for 90% of this movie, if not 100% of this movie.
It's great.
And it's just like, that's like, why would he be the one, especially if you've got CIA agent Strutter out there, like let him be the guy that's like, you know, like uncovering more of this, like it like obviously they're not going to do that in a Bond movie or whatever, but it's just like Bond is so out of his element for the entirety of this
100%.
film that it's just it breaks any kind of like immersion on that front in like the wrong kind of ways. It's still a fun movie.
Get used to that.
Whatnot,
Get used to that for basically all future Bond films.
I don't think that's true. Like I think it works for me largely. Like I don't have any issues with it, but like that's a fair point, Trev.
I mean, like when he's out there, you know, facing off against vague European baddies or whatever, it's like, okay, fine, he's British, you know, a whole bunch of like, you know, surrounded by a whole bunch of white people, but like him in this movie where literally the entirety of Harlem is somehow in on like like as soon as he's driving anywhere, let's keep an eye on that honky kind of stuff. And this like absurd level of the network that Mr. Big has of like, oh, a shoe shine guy has a radio just in case a spy from like England was going to come through here or whatever. It's like, like okay, none of this makes any sense, but sure.
Posh British spy going to a soul bar in Harlem.
It's
like
so good.
Just incompatible, just does not work, but at the same time just makes it so absurd and great for me. But like I think that blends into like if you take the Europeanness out of Bond's situations, he doesn't really spy. Like, his spy work is, I tell them my name, they know I'm a spy, but I get the job done anyway.
Yeah.
And sometimes he just gets captured, and that's like, and oh well, it's like not a great spy move there, James, but no, it's fantastic. I love it. I do want to give a massive shout out though to the intro of the movie, the opening, where it's the simultaneous assassinations.
Mm-hmm.
The assassination in New Orleans during the parade
is the best.
Incredible.
will never not be just the dopest shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I love it so much. Even when he's like, "Hey, whose funeral is it?" And he's like, yours, and he just gets stabbed in the stomach, and I'm just like, "Oh, it's
just
so
stabbed
good."
in the side, and he's like, "Oh," and then falls to the street. But by then, the parade's all around him, and then anybody who's earlier in the film was like, "Well, that's ridiculous. Somebody would have noticed." They do it right in front of James and what's his face, Felix
Leiter.
They do it right in front of him. Like, in a moment, it's over. It's like, where he was right here. What happened to him?
I mean,
well, maybe
they arrive just after he's been killed.
Yeah, just after that.
So no, they don't do it right in front of him. But it is a good show of like, oh, everybody is in on this. Like but it's also like Mr. Big has everybody in his pocket.
But also, like, we saw how, like, the entire process of how methodically they do it at the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. For it to be like, oh, they're doing it. It's like, oh, are they going to get there in time? And it's like, nope, because here we are. We're doing the joyous part now.
Oh, right. Yeah,
and everybody's laughing. And it's like, I love that aspect of, like, how, like, Trevor called it absurd. I call it brilliant.
Yeah. I think
how
in
simpatico they are.
Right. I think that is sort of, for me, the story of Live and Let Die, is that it can be both. It can be both absurd and brilliant, right? Like, one thing that Trevor talked about that I find really important in the movie is, the fact that it is still probably 49 years after it came out, the most diverse Bond movie. And, you, I think, can get into a thoughtful conversation and discussion around, like, how much it leans into, like, the blaxploitation films of the early 70s. And I think that's totally fair and totally legitimate. But I also still think it's something to be said for the fact that, like, 5 decades later, this is basically a movie that has essentially an all-black cast except for, like, 3 characters, including the only black villain in the Bond series' entire run still, one of 2 or 3 black Bond girls, and the only one for another 30 years, right? Like, I think for me, this being one of the earliest Bond movies I watched had such an impression, right? And I can only imagine if I had grown up in 1973, right, and watched Bond and Rosie Carver together, and watched all of these really great, like, strong black performances being held across the board from, like, all the various characters. Like, I think that is such a key ingredient of the movie for me, right? Like, I think I will prefer something like Live and Let Die 100 times over something, ironically enough, considered as my childhood favorite, You're Gonna Live Twice, which, like, I think does something similar with, like, Japanese culture, but I think Trevor would agree, like, very clearly felt like they just had never talked to, like, really that many Japanese people. Like, they talked to, like, 2 people, and then we're like, great, we got it. We're just gonna do a colonial perspective on Japan kind of thing. And, like, this felt way more authentic and way more real and way more ingrained and not as, like, jarring. And yeah, like, I think it is such a wonderful aspect of the film, and that ties into, like, the different places we're going that aren't typical Bond locations. It ties into the kind of parts of cities and characters that we're not used to seeing. And I think it helps give Live and Let Die a distinct feel from certainly the movie before it and Diamonds Are Forever, but even in the movies to follow. Like, it's got, like, a very special place, I think, within the Bond canon for all of those reasons that I always really love and appreciate. And the last big...
I was just going to jump in because I like one of the things we've talked about especially a lot on the show, Logan, is like we talked about it, especially when obviously we did the On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby, and, like, oh, it takes Bond, it takes a Bond actor a couple films to, like, fit into the part. Like, I thought more immediately is a more likable Bond than Connery
Yes.
was for me. Like you kind of have this like romanticization of Connery, and you even said earlier like everything he does is cool. And I'm like, no, he was just a mean guy for a lot of like for and a lot of that is Connor, like just pure Connery slipping through versus, you know, relatively nicer guy Roger Moore. But like in this, I immediately was like oh, like it didn't, like if that is still the case and will hold true, and like, oh, he will grow into the role of Bond, I'm interested to see where that goes, because I thought out of the gate, like jumping into this, he was like, he held his own perfectly well, hit on the elements of a Bond that I'm interested in. Yeah, had a few too many stupid quips, like the inflated ego thing or whatever, but like I thought he was, you know, a suave version of the character without the like malice and bitterness that Connery obviously has by the end of it. But even like in his earlier outings, I thought Connery was just a little bit of a meaner Bond than
Yeah.
Moore is here.
So that was actually the last point I was going to talk about in sort of my recap was Roger Moore, because I'd be remiss if I didn't. This is probably my favorite Roger Moore performance, either this or Spy Who Loved Me, which we'll get to in a couple weeks. I think he is so good here, and watching it again, I think I was particularly impressed by how much I loved Roger Moore. I think he slips into this character like a hand in a glove in a lot of ways. It is such a natural and seamless fit. I think you see why the producers had wanted him to be James Bond for years by this point. And something me and Frank talked, probably not an exaggeration, for like half an hour at lunch, was just like, Roger Moore is fucking hot in this movie.
He's
like, he
so
looks
goddamn
so good.
hot.
And
Holy shit! As the only queer guy here, he's so fucking hot.
He's so hot, and like part of why I again reference, I think, the Goldfinger aspect of this here is that like Goldfinger is Sean Connery at like his physical prime. Like Sean Connery's looking hot to trot in Goldfinger, but more than that, it's the outfits that he has in Goldfinger. Like his outfits in Goldfinger, from the white tux to like the golf outfit to like the 3-piece suit he wears at the like Kentucky farm, are all like iconic Bond suits and outfits. And similarly here, this is probably the best dressed Roger Moore ever as his Bond. Like all of his outfits are so tailored perfect and like are so indicative of like, again, to Frank's point, like the vibe and feel of like early 70s fashion. The like button down suit when he just like wakes up in the morning with Rosie, to like all of the kind of like summer suits he's carrying out in San Monique. Like he just, and the huge pea coat he wears in New York City, like he looks so good in this movie, both physically and also what he's wearing. And he just has, I think, a certain energy and a certain way that he carries himself, right? Like unquestionably, to your earlier point, Trevor, like he's just a different Bond, right, than Sean Connery is. Like they're playing two different kind of interpretations of that character, right? Like Connery's is more of a like brutish, brawling kind of a figure, one who just kind of exudes, I think, like, you know, cool and very much like a overhyped like sex drive kind of thing. Like he just exudes these things and is just kind of has this like raw power to him that Roger Moore never has. Roger Moore doesn't have this kind of like raw, I think, power and brutish nature to him. And when he leans into it at times, I think most egregiously in the next movie, A Man with the Golden Gun, it really doesn't work for him. It's just not that version of his Bond at all, and it is really jarring. And I think, you know, I've talked a little bit on the pod before with the fact that I think Roger Moore's run as Bond is sort of 3 mini eras of the character. Like I think he kind of evolves and then devolves maybe as it goes on. And I think his first 2 movies here and in Man with the Golden Gun, he is playing the role the most serious. And I think it largely works here. I think there are a lot of issues I have with it in the follow-up in Man with the Golden Gun, but here I think he's so good and strikes such a good balance between humor and fun and also more serious and kind of actiony moments. And yeah, it is truly crazy that he is 4 years older than Sean Connery is in Diamonds Are Forever. and looks probably a decade younger. Like he does not look like he's 45 years old. He looks like he's in his 30s. He's just aged so well. And yeah, so I absolutely had to shout out Roger Moore. I think he is great in the movie. And without belaboring the point too much longer, we're going to move it along.
The real MVP though was Mrs. Bell.
Yes, yeah,
100%.
Well, she did. She's in the ICU.
Yeah,
that was one that stuck out for me this time. Is that like she's clearly fine at the end of that scene, and then all on the phone, it's like she's in the ICU.
I think like because I watched it a second time, and the last time we see her, she's just like frozen, and so I kind of get the feeling she's catatonic in that, based on the line that we get later, is like she is in shock from what has just occurred, and that's what puts her in the ICU. But yeah, she was a great character in general.
To make a cultural note, she is an old lady from Louisiana who was chased around in a plane
by a bunch of black guys in cars.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that was the thing that was most jarring to her so much as she got hijacked and nearly killed by a strange British man.
By a strange British man. Yeah. I just don't think that was a good day for her. No. For Miss Bell, and I don't want to shame her good character, so I won't insinuate that it was the first thing I brought up.
Trevor,
I did love it though when they're like closing the barn doors on the thing, and then he just goes for it and it rips the wings off, and her last thing cuts to her, and she's just like, "Holy shit!" It just slams and like rips the wings off, and like it's a dumb sequence, but it made me laugh. Like, and I'm like, this is really funny.
It's a good scene.
It is like actually like very, very impressive. Like the maneuverability that he has with that, because taxiing is not like it's not like driving a car. You're doing that with your feet on the pedals. So he's having to like navigate and like pivot between very close alleyways, like in between planes. They definitely like destroy a lot of planes in that sequence, and I was like, that kind of hurt my little heart as somebody who grew up with like in a family of pilots and stuff. But yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to Mrs. Bell and her.
Agreed. Trevor, what has or hasn't aged well? What is the earmuffs moment?
I mean, like again, the blaxploitation elements of the film are a mixed bag, obviously. I like the especially I think the like over demonization of like voodoo elements or whatever, like that the effect that plays into so much of the film, I think is like, oh, this is like, this wouldn't be made today, especially. And does much more fall into the period piece. And then I think obviously the special effect of Kananga blowing up at the end is not a good
balloon.
That's the one.
Does not hold
That's
up
the winner.
today.
That's the one, yeah.
So I'll give you the floor on that one, Logan.
It has always been I can't even stress it, like, and I somehow always forget it's like it happens. Like I always am like, Live and Let Die is one of my like favorite Bond movies. It's a ton of fun. It's a blast. Like it's a great time. And then I somehow always forget that in the movie it ends in just like the most just like, oh, like what an awful, like poorly done, like, yeah, like just like boom, blow up, like CGI thing. It's awful. Like
it's practical effects all the way through.
It is so bad. And every time I see it, I just can't help but just like groan, laugh, roll my eyes. It is easily the thing that ages poorly. One thing we should also, I guess,
the thing that ages the worst, though, even worse than that, is the sheriff character and just everything around.
So that's not actually what I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, for sure it is. It's how like just absolutely like calls the guy Adam boy, and like, let's see a boy.
I mean, like he that absolutely, but he also calls Bond a boy later. Like that he's not using in a racist way. He's just using that in a Southern way. He's like, I mean, maybe it has a little bit more bite or malice to it when he's being racist with it, but like the fact that guy got fourth billing in this movie also pisses me the fuck off.
No, the thing that I would choose as the thing that's like aged worse, it's like actually not great, would obviously be like Bond seduced in solitaire by like stacking the deck literally of the lover cards. It's not great for sure. Like that's always it's like, it's just straight up not great.
Manipulating somebody's
scenario.
spiritual belief into sleeping with you? What? No. How could that be wrong?
It's not, and like it's very clearly played for a laugh, and then like it's like supposed to be like made better because then she like actually falls for him, and like they're totally together. It's like fine, don't worry about it, kind of thing.
Then again, it does lead up to like one of my favorite like sexy moments of the movie, which is he goes, "I have to like be honest with you, I stacked the deck, yada yada." And then he goes, "We have to leave. We don't have much time." She goes, "Enough time for another lesson."
See, I hated all of that. I didn't like any of that. I didn't like any of the. I think I'm much more in the Trevor camp of like I didn't pretty much like any of this, any of the romance scene between them because I'm always just like this is just not great though because it's grounded in
a lie
at best. Yeah,
at best a lie.
I mean,
yeah,
well,
no, there's that.
I would like the pushback I would give on that is she already had pulled the lover's card. Like before he stacks the deck, she'd already pulled that one more time, and like because of how fully because like I'm also in this camp of like we talk about the supernatural elements of this movie, and I'm like I mean like I think in this world there has to be some kind of grounding, and so like I think the supernatural is like the other characters might believe it, but it's not real. Like she's not actually predicting the future and stuff, so like she's just buying into those elements that like I will say I wish the deck hadn't been stacked and she had just pulled the lover's card again. Sure. And the reveal of all of them being the lover's card is certainly played for a joke. But I think she still kind of goes in on it because she already foresaw this in the cards or whatever, and she already believed that this was inevitable, less so than like, he's actually tricked her or anything like that.
Well, yeah, she draws the lovers in Harlem, and he's like, what does that mean? She goes, it doesn't matter, you're about to die.
Mm-hmm.
And
but she draws it again when talking to Kananga, of like who's coming, and she pulls the lover's card and tells him, no, it's the death card.
Yep.
I think it's no good. I don't like it.
I like. I will also say, on the flip side of that, and if we can talk about it for a moment, the one thing that I don't think has aged well quite at all is actually the portrayal, like the ineptitude that that I don't want to get the name wrong here, but I don't think you. Rosie, thank you. Yeah. She's not in the billing. Why don't you have her in the billing?
I do. Do I not?
You do not have her.
Maybe it's just because Rosie sucks. I don't know.
That's the point I want to make is like Rosie, like as when I was younger, I remember Rosie being much more badass. I don't know why.
Yeah, she's in college.
But like rewatching it now, it's like I thought she was way cooler than this because she's like this. She's like the sexy Bond girl, like that was like quote unquote forbidden for the time, but she's like completely inept and like doesn't do any of the spy stuff levels.
She's a bad spy.
Level, right.
She's a bad guy. She's just
bad at everything. Yeah, I mean, like from her for like I didn't like she comes in and like he flips her or whatever, and then she just like she gives up putting her hair back on. I was like, I have no idea what this character is going to be, but already like she has lost me.
Yeah.
I remember her being so much more of a femme fatale growing up, but no.
Yeah.
Sorry, Trevor,
like
what would you say?
She is like she does say a couple times like this is only my second mission or whatever, which in the context of having just seen No Time to Die and Ana de Armas's character says almost the exact same thing in there. Like it is night and day the difference between the actual like aptitude of the characters. And so like Rosie, while I appreciate that, like she, Gloria Hendry, the actress playing her, I appreciate that she like broke down characters and that she's also playing the part she was asked to play is like a terrible character and just like the dumb. But I don't think that's a thing that like doesn't hold up. Like I think she's just a badly written character. I don't think that that's tied to like because she's a black agent or henchwoman or whatever, because again no, I
just said it aged poorly for me because I remember it when I was younger.
Got it.
Sorry.
I thought you were putting like a layer of like, this was like a racial thing that they put into this character.
Nope. I remember her being way more badass for when I was a kid, and it turns out she 1000% was not.
Yeah.
So
moving on to Villain's Corner, where do we want to rank? God help us all, this is going to be a fun one. Kananga / Mr. Big on the list. We'll start with Trevor to get a grounded perspective, I think.
I mean, like, again, you love Blofeld more than I do.
I do.
Specifically, you love Blofeld 1.0 more than I do.
I do.
I would put Kananga above Oddjob in our list, below Red Grant.
Would you really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I'm more in the Frank and Cameron train than I think you are. Of like, I think he's a good, competent villain for a lot of this movie. And we don't see a lot of like him and Bond working against one another. But we do see him in a lot of scenes talking with Solitaire or talking with his henchmen, or kind of like, like scheming basically. And like, I mean, he also has just an incredible introduction that we talked a little bit about, but like the idea that like he is so in on the fact that Felix and the CIA are like wiretapping him that he has like gone out of his way to record an entire speech and uses that to like basically stage his getaway. Like he outsmarts most of the people who are after him in this movie, and like Frank kind of talked about earlier, has like an absolute, I mean, like he talks about how like it would basically be he and the telephone company who would have the only two monopolies in America after after his plan goes through. So yeah, I thought he had a great plan. Like,
shout out to the Bell reference, by the way.
Yeah, AT&T.
The AT&T Bell reference about a monopoly.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, what a good reference.
I think like his obviously his death is like the weakest part of him, kind of aspect.
Definitely.
And I don't think he ends up like, I think like I have him basically right below Red Grant, because I think Red Grant is a persistent threat to Bond throughout the movie, whereas like Bond is basically like a fly in the ointment for Kananga for most of this, and what ends up being the like his downfall is he doesn't treat Bond with the level of threat that he should. So that's where I would put him. Is I would put him above Oddjob.
I don't necessarily hate that ranking, right? Like I like Oddjob, I think, more, and obviously Blofeld. But I'm not entirely opposed to having him be fourth. Cam or Frank, is there an argument to be made for him to be higher than fourth on the list, or are you content with that in our ranking here?
I think he should be second only to Goldfinger.
That's a crazy take. Wow, okay.
That's kind of where I was at, too.
Make your case.
Well, we've only been part of one episode.
Sure.
They don't care about how much we liked Telly Savalas in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Make the case. Yeah, make the case why it should be that high.
This is the only one we've seen recently. And also I'll make the case for first off, solid plan when it comes to like the economic basics of how you're going to make your plan work. Nails it. 2, establishes how deep of a connection he has down from the lowest levels of like the reporting stuff off Harlem to the highest levels of staging a funeral to assassinate a single human being.
He can absolutely hire 50 people to do a parade as a cover for a murder.
Yeah,
a couple of times.
Some dude hang out in front of the like. Well, coincidentally, one place he doesn't want people hanging out.
It's again that like he knows he's an agent. He knows that guy's an agent. Like it's not that he just killed a random guy who was standing outside of the Filet of Soul.
He's just murdering guys who loiter.
Yeah,
loitering's a crime. I like how they're like, well, wait, why did you kill that other person? Loitering's a crime, no matter where you are. No, I love that his plan is soundproof. It also is easily franchised. Like he clearly has franchises throughout the entire country as part of his plan, so it's well networked and like has a well laid out infrastructure to it. Second, like he is completely like if he ever gets arrested, boom, diplomatic immunity. Like he's like, the plan is solid, man. The plan is just solid. And I think another thing I like about it is, Bond is just really more of a nuisance. Like, if he himself was not so superstitious, he would not go so far out of his way to recover a woman and like waste all these resources. Like, everything happened because he's so superstitious. He doesn't want this woman. Granted, she also knows a lot about his operation, so that's probably not a great thing either. Now to think about that, but still, like his only downfall is his own superstition and his own arrogance. Everything else was solid. And I think he just like nails that. And like Bond is a nuisance. Bond is a triviality to the overarching success of his plan that ends up coming back to bite him for sure, because Bond blows up the poppy fields, but he's not even fazed by that because all it is to him is a setback. I love that level of confidence meets arrogance, meets execution, meets planning that he just encapsulates and does so well. And to top it all off, he has the one-upper on Bond. Because when Bond goes to introduce himself, he has the best comeback of all time. Names are for tombstones. Take him out back and waste him. Just snaps so good.
Again,
love that.
Undercut by the fact that he doesn't kill Bond later after he has survived this a couple of times. I
digress. That's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I find it interesting. Like, so much of my thoughts on Kananga are like, I agree, but not with like the level of intensity you feel, right? Like I like Kananga's plan. I like the fact, I talked to Frank about this at lunch, like I like the fact that this movie and his plan and like everything about it is a much more grounded, and
he's not nuking the planet like Blofeld did last week.
Yeah, it's the first time since Goldfinger where like the fate of the world isn't at stake, right? The last 4 movies have all been about like how like nuclear Armageddon or weapons are being held for ransom or just being deployed or whatever, and like it's just like a way more chill, like the first 3 Bond movies were, kind of thing. That said, I think his plan has more flaws than you do, right? Like I will say that, right? Like I think it's
the Killmonger effect. Like it's that like, oh, we like the villain's plan kind of thing because we recognize that it would work or it should work, like, or whatever.
Yeah, like because I think part of this is the fact that like me and Trevor have just watched some of these other movies where it's like I look at some pretty much like the first 3 Bond movies where like those plans all either straight up did work or should have worked, except for like weird flukes. Like Goldfinger's plan straight up went flawless. Like he achieved his plan, except for a crazy fluke of luck of a guy getting thrown from the rafters by Oddjob that landed near enough to like a bunch of weird, and even then the timer on the nuclear bomb in Goldfinger's base only stopped by 7 seconds, right? Like his plan went fantastic. And like same in like From Russia with Love, like Rosa Klebb had the electric machine in her hands, if not for like Tanya turn around at that point in time and then her like closing the door like a dummy. Just leave, Rosa. But like these people's plans worked, whereas like the last 4 plans were all fucking disasters across the board, basically, with the Blofeld movies. And then
like the last Blofeld movie killed a lot of people with nukes. So
he did.
Theoretically, he's probably the most deadly villain that we've had.
True, but his plan was just, I don't even like. Yeah, it was just a very bizarre one.
It was handled very trivially by the rest of the world.
Right. So I like the fact that this one is like more serious, but also like I do think there are issues with it. But like I like Kananga, right? Like again, ultimately we're gonna rank him 4th because that's where we're gonna put him.
I don't know, Frank. What are your thoughts?
It was a solid case, I will say.
Frank hasn't given his 2 bits.
Yeah, I was gonna like.
I'm listening.
And I was also, Frank, in your thoughts, I'm curious, especially as you were the one who played Far Cry 6, if there are any like Anton Castillo vibes to Kananga, because like I was definitely thinking about that a lot, especially when you get into like the poppy fields versus the plot in Far Cry 6.
Yeah, that's a good kind of call out because they are very similar, especially when you kind of bring it up like that, because it is about like growing the stuff in the fields and then like trying to like take over and become a bigger thing. And like obviously it's going to give you the money, which is going to give us the means and the power and all that. And it is like super similar. Although I would probably say I like since it's a little bit different, I like the spin that Far Cry takes on it more, but they take a darker, more hardcore, like more modern take on it, where he is like this dictatorship dude that has like people are dying in the fields trying to grow this crop because the stuff they spray on is like poisoning them. And like if that was in this movie, that would be awesome. Like if he was actually like even more of a bad guy, because like he's killing his own people to grow this stuff, like part of his plan, and like a lot of that would be probably too much and too intense for like 1973, but it's just like like that is stuff that's in the Far Cry plot that I think makes Anton Castillo like a more bad guy and definitely just like a worse human being. Especially because he's not like in that he's not even going for like, oh, I want to be the like big top drug crime lord of everything, even though that's kind of what he's like going towards anyways. Does that make sense? Like, you guys follow me there?
I was just curious if there was like parallels in the way that I was thinking. So thank you. But yes, also just give your thoughts on Kananga in general.
Oh yeah. But that's why I definitely think there's some parallels there for sure. And it is interesting to you kind of call that out, and I can kind of see those there now and think about that. And with how much I like Kananga, like I also personally, just based off of the list and looking at what you have, like I feel it's slight disadvantage not having rewatched some of the other movies recently, but I would also put him at number 2, like behind Goldfinger, because I do think Goldfinger is better. And for me personally, though, like I've just never been a dude that's like super into Blofeld. Like I understand he is the Joker to Bond's Batman, but I really think it's not done amazingly well, especially because there's just different actors and different writers, and it's not like, oh, we get to sit down and we get to tell this amazing back and forth between Bond and Blofeld over and over and over again. It's always just like piecemealed and retconned, and it's like it just doesn't hit the way for me that it does for like a lot of other Bond fans. And maybe that's just me going back in hindsight and watching everything instead of watching it like growing up with it, you know? But that's why like Blofeld, even if he is a smart guy that has smart plans and he's like the head of Spectre, like it's just, and he is like a bigger figure. It's just like, I think that Kananga is a cooler villain. And part of what I like about it too is like, he's a different villain than we get in any of the movies. And besides the fact that he is like competent, and besides the fact that his plan, I think, is smart, and it's just a lot of the way he operates and the way he does things and looks at things, he's totally different. And I know we've kind of already, I think, talked about some of the things that I do like about him, but yeah, when he does tell Bond at the beginning, he's like, waste him. Like, I'm not like, get rid of this dude. Like, just kill him. And then I like the little joke on that too, where Bond doesn't know what waste him means. And he's like, I assume that's not good. And then they just kind of like carry him outside or whatever. Like I like a lot of like what Kananga is there for and what he does, and I wish there was like more of him in other villains in the future. But it's really like they could only kind of did it this one time, this kind of specific way. And I think Cam has kind of a cool point there too. But yeah, he is the prime minister, so if they did catch him, he's just he has immunity. Like there's all these like weird levels to it. That's like things they don't even necessarily call out. I also love his. Like maybe you can't just attribute this to Kananga, but his white Cadillac that has assassin mirrors that can like fire darts out of the mirrors, like that thing is sick as hell.
Yeah, pimp mobile is also another word I never expected to hear in a Bond film.
James Bond movie.
And that's what I love. That I wanted to call that out earlier. It's like you literally get to hear Felix Leiter pick up a phone, or no, he doesn't pick. He turns around and yells at a guy, "Get me a make on a white pimp mobile." And like that is in the movie. But I love that stuff, and that's what I think. Kananga, I also do like the part where he tears his face off, and I know like we kind of talked about maybe it could have been done better, maybe especially for us coming in hindsight, it's a very easy reveal that it did kind of get me the second time, because I've seen this movie before and I forgot, like, and when he tears his face, there is that thing where I was like, why does he look all weird? And then he tears, and I was like, oh shit, that's right, that's so cool actually. And this is like way before like Mission Impossible, where people were just tearing their faces off. Like this is like a really cool set piece and scene. But that's why like I feel like I know I probably like don't have the same vigor to be able to just fight to like carry Kananga to the end, but personally I think he is ultimately one of the stronger villains in any of the Bond movies, even though like Goldfinger's probably above him, and there's a couple other people that probably slot in above him too. I think he is a top tier villain for the series.
I will agree with your point as a final note that I would have loved more villains like Kananga. He is unique, both obviously because of him being the only black villain, but also just even in terms of people of color in general. It is, at least through the 90s, it is a very European white centric kind of role. There are a few exceptions. Octopussy will get, Kamal Khan kind of stepping in, but otherwise, basically all the way through like the Pierce Brosnan run, there are like 3 or 4 people who aren't a white villain. And so I would have loved to have just seen that be different. Because I think it does add a different element to the dynamic between Bond and the villain when it isn't someone from a rich European country, right? Like it just is, by I think the nature of that, something that's going to be kind of interesting and different. And a new challenge for Bond.
At the same point, though, like it's a fascinating kind of conversation, because I think nowadays I think about the conversation of like, why are so many, like, yes, there's an aspect of like, why is every villain, upper class, European kind of thing, but then also like, why are so many henchmen of like Middle Eastern descent or something in a post 9/11 era, especially?
Sure.
Like it's
Sure.
the like, so I think if you did have, more like diverse casting in solely in the villain roles, I think that ends up causing like a whole other like level of like questionability. So
Sure, I think it's totally fair, and like that's why I would want them to be more situated in like the main villain and less like the henchman category, where they are getting to be a bit more fleshed out instead of just like, that is someone we're afraid of post 9/11 basically kind of stereotype. And so, but I think it's a valid point too, obviously. But yeah, that is Kananga. We slot him in at 4th. He is just behind Red Grant, Blowfield 2.0, and Arik Goldfinger. Somehow Dr. No is still last, even though, again, I want to reiterate, I really like Dr. No. Just for everyone
I hate Dr. No.
Who's
Dr.
getting
No
angry.
fucking sucks.
I like Dr. No, but apparently that is a more divisive take than I thought it was. I
mean,
moving
like,
on from
He is a better Dr. No than Dr. No.
Flat out.
100%.
Uh,
Tiki rules.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put
Tee
Tee above above Dr. No, below Rosa Klebb on this list. Can we do that?
I don't know.
Logan?
I put Tee above Rosa Club, baby.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
true.
Rosa Klebb's cool.
Rosa Klebb just has a knife in her shoe.
Yeah, Rosa Club has a knife issue.
Tee has crocodiles and metal can opener.
His multi-purpose use.
It's not multi-purpose.
Claw hand?
It is
It's
one.
It has
it
a
is
sharp.
one purpose.
It has sharp. It can crush, but it can also do very simple tasks. Multi-purpose.
But what does Bond say? Butter hooks or whatever, butter claws,
Yeah, which is
something
improvised.
like that instead of
Yeah.
butterfingers.
Yeah, that was improv on the set. In terms of QLab, it's pretty straightforward. You got to watch. I think it's fine. Frank and Cam, I think, like it more than I do. But it's like a cool watch, but it is, at the end of the day, it is a watch that has gadgets that are like not talked about that are then revealed. This is why you send a quartermaster to explain it and not the head of the entire Secret Service.
For me, I like that he was only given really one special agent tool outside of like his bug kit that he has,
which does not work, or it's like,
I didn't
obviously he identifies where the bugs are, but like there's nothing on the device that's telling where those bugs are.
That changes,
which is
all. Yeah, you also caught that.
It was
it fills up red when he gets.
No, it doesn't. It was always red.
Yeah, it's always red. It was definitely I was like, oh, I was waiting for it to be like, red to green or something, but no, it's just red the whole time. Yeah, it's
just red.
But I will say, I just want to highlight two things. One, Bond already has had the watch. It is just being returned to him, so he already knows all the gadgets behind it. He's explaining the gadgets to M. So like, there's that justification as to like why he didn't need those things explained. But then two, and it's not a Q gadget thing. And it's already been mentioned, but shout out to the Felix lighter.
Absolutely.
That absolutely raises this film a little bit on the gadgets ranking for me. Even though
Frank also really loved that. Yeah,
I made the note of like a Felix lighter, clever.
Yeah,
my thing about why I really like the watch is it's because he had it's a single tool, but he's put into different situations to utilize it in not straight uniquely different ways. But not only that, but it isn't always the out. He uses it for the boat. The boat doesn't get to him because it's tied up, so he has to figure something else out. And I like the idea that sometimes being a spy, you kind of have to MacGyver / improv your way out of it. And I like that's one of the reasons why I like that it's just a watch. It's not the watch and 12 other gadgets and cars and stuff. It's very much this is Bond raw dogging his way out there in the wild.
All right, that's not the use of raw dogging.
Didn't love that.
Yeah. Also, I just on that note though, I will also, as somebody who GoldenEye was my first Bond, and obviously there's so much of a the watch is one of kind of those central gadgets, and it hasn't really been one of his like iconic or central gadgets thus far in the series.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that this was like one of the first times we're getting that element. But yeah, the fact he uses it to grab a teaspoon from M, he uses it to fail at grabbing a boat, and then he uses it to buzzsaw a thing to his
and
way
grab
out
a
of
little
hand things. Like
shark pellet.
if they had also used it to divert the direction of a bullet, I would have been like, yes, this is a top tier Bond.
The one
gadget.
thing they tease, basically. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good watch. In terms of those music moments, obviously the music on this film was "Live and Let Die," performed by Paul McCartney and Wings. I mean, does anyone have an argument to be made that this is not the best Bond theme so far? I think only Trevor would maybe be the one.
Oh no, this is easily the best Bond for me.
Okay, yeah, this is a unanimous. It is fantastic. Like, this is one of the only Bond themes, I think, and there'll be a few in like the 80s and 90s, but like this is one of the only ones that I think really stands as a great piece of music outside of the Bond movie. Like, you can just listen to this and like have no sort of like preconceived idea of like, oh, this is the main Bond theme from a 1973 film. It's like, no, this is just a banger rock song.
Yeah. Here are 3 notes of mine in succession. Ooh, I don't know how to feel about this San Monique sequence with an apparent witch doctor killing a guy with a snake bite. Live and Let Die slaps, though. Best Bond song yet. And in store for another Guy Hamilton movie.
Yeah.
I love this song so much. Like, I do just love it as a song outside the movie. I talked about how I love how they utilize it and change it in different ways. Either they just use part of the song or they literally just do like a different cover of it. Because there's even like a weirder orchestral version that plays at some point, like when he's doing one of the love sequences. But this is still my favorite of the Bond songs. Like, even if you include all of the songs that have come out for all of the movies to this day, this is still my favorite personally. And I think it is just like, it's a total banger.
Yeah.
I think for me, Skyfall.
Yeah, that would be my number 2.
I like Skyfall better, but it's close. It's real close.
I also do want to give a shout out to, I think GoldenEye has like a really underappreciated, weirdly.
We'll get to that when you talk about GoldenEye. We're talking about Live or Let Die.
Thing.
You just gave Skyfall a shout out, so like go
my
fuck
movie's
yourself,
closer. Cam. Yeah. So yeah, this is the number 1 Bond theme on our list. Second is Goldfinger, which is very great. Then You Only Live Twice. Then Diamonds Are Forever. Then On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then Thunderball.
I mean, again, just kind of pointing out that I have grown up my entire life, not until we did this series, knowing that Live and Let Die was a Bond theme. I have just known Live and Let Die as a song and as a great song, in and of itself. So that I definitely think is, sets it apart as like it more than any other, maybe until Skyfall broke through to the mainstream and had a lasting presence in the mainstream.
It's like how in 20 years, nobody's going to remember that the song Paul McCartney did for Destiny is for a video game. You're just going to remember it as just a great Paul McCartney song.
No, I don't think that's going to be the case at all.
That song slaps, and I'll stand it till I die.
You mentioned that song, and I was like, "Oh, that's right, that was a thing." Huh? Okay,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's the reaction I had. Was like, "Oh, right, yeah." That leads us to final
I throw in
review.
One thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
sorry to just. I don't want to completely derail, but while we were still on the music, real quick, I also love the title sequence though of this. Like, it's filmed super well, and it's just there's a bunch of really awesome visuals, and there's even the moment where it goes from that one person's face to the skull. And it's like awesome. On fire, and I'm like, that's so fucking cool. Yeah. Like, this is a great title sequence that goes so well with the song. I just wanted to give that a shout out.
I think that is a great transition, Frank, to the final review. I'm gonna do Cam and Frank first, since they don't have the whole list that me and Trevor have. Cameron will go through you first. Give us your kind of 30-second elevator pitch on your final thoughts on Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die, while it does have its controversial points and like things that have not held up well, downright should probably not have held up then, in certain aspects, but I still think it stands out as being one of the best Bond films, whether it's the fact that Roger Moore's debut as Bond was just such an outstanding smash hit, and top of that with like its groundbreaking moments with its characters and cast, and also the fact that like, to this day, Jane Seymour in this film just does something to me.
You and Jane Seymour, I love it.
Just does something to me. I don't know why Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, like this doesn't happen after this role, but for some reason,
She's
this
like
role is
20 years
solitary.
older, to be fair, in Dr. Quinn.
I mean,
Madison Woman
true,
2.
but like
Yeah.
in no other Jane Seymour role have I been as smitten as I was, and I don't know if there's maybe only a couple of Bond girls that I've been more smitten by than Solitaire, and like to the point where I was a
love
young
that for you.
8-year-old boy to now as a 32-year-old man.
Yeah.
Like still, my heart goes on. Like love it.
I love that. Frank, your final thoughts on Live and Let Die?
Yeah, I agree with a ton of what Cam said, because I think there's unfortunately some things that don't age well, and also there's just some things like pacing wise that like could have probably been cut or changed. Like the end of the movie just kind of falls apart a little bit for me, even though I know we didn't give like a full breakdown on beat by beat there, but it is with like the extended chases that kind of mean nothing. Then the train fight that's cool, but also just means nothing and just kind of extends the movie for like 15 minutes. Like there is problems with it, but for what they hit so hard. And like it is one of my favorite Bond movies. Roger Moore is one of my favorite Bonds. He just like slides right into this role and is such a charming, suave dude that's like hilarious, but it's not like overly campy. He just like has it all. And that's what I really like about a ton about this movie, especially because this is Roger Moore, I think, at his best, and that's why it's like it's just unfortunate, kind of the rest of the trek that'll happen with some of
the
his
next
movies.
6 movies, right?
Yeah.
Cam and Frank, I am curious, just kind of quickly, Cam, where would this rank if you kind of have to think within your Bond kind of list?
Like my overall Bond list, or just the movies you guys have covered?
Overall Bond list.
Oh gosh. Man, it's definitely in my top 10.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would it make
absolutely.
your top 5?
Maybe it like if I really sat down and like drew it all out together, like it might skid in at number 5.
Give us 20 weeks, we'll do it.
It's tough. There's so many great films, but I do think this stands out as being definitely within the top 10 of the Bond franchise for all the reasons I've talked about over the last 2.5 hours. So
Frank, same thoughts?
Pretty much, yeah, because I think this is easily in the top 10 for Bond, and for me personally, this is in the top 5. I kind of thought about it earlier, and like even
me and Frank have the exact same top 5.
Yeah, because I was gonna say even like my top 5 is totally Casino Royale, Skyfall, Goldfinger, Goldeneye, and Live and Let Die. Like that's totally like for me like the 5 best. Not necessarily in that exact order, but it's just like those are the top 5 for me. And I think Live and Let Die at this point for me kind of slots in at number 5 as like being the 5th best.
Trevor, it's your turn. What are your final thoughts, and where does Live and Let Die fall in your list for you?
So before that, I did look up when Cameron was talking about his sexual awakening with Jane Seymour. She was 22 at the time this film was shot, or like at the time the film released. Which immediately I'm like, oh, now I feel like extremely icky, because that means Roger Moore was twice her age when of course doing this.
Give it 6 more movies, Trevor, to get even ickier.
So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah, this is by far the least icky.
You've already made reference to the fact that like by the end he's like, I'm older than the Bond girl's mother.
Yes,
gross.
That's when he knew it was time to leave.
So yeah, that is like already just recontextualizing and recoloring this. But I like overall,
but he's so fucking hot, Trevor.
I would say I give this some like it's probably a B or a B plus for me. Taking out the J.W. Pepper stuff, because J.W. Pepper brings it down to like a fucking D. Like the half-hour boat chase that we're dealing with him on, I loathe. It is Thunderball levels of bad, in terms of like my disdain for that. But the fact that like we were able to talk about so many good points and just kind of like skirt over that whole sequence was like, okay, fine, I can forgive that.
So excited for Man with a Golden Gun.
Yeah, I'm willing to overlook that. Give it a B plus kind of range in there. And then in my ranking, I think I'm gonna put this 4th, below Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then Live and Let Die, above Diamonds Are Forever, which, again, Diamonds Are Forever, probably a much worse movie than that, but I had so much fun watching it with you.
It was a ton of fun to watch
that
together,
it's still, and then, like Dr. No, You Only Live Twice, and then, like Dr. No and Above, I'm like, they're fine, whatever. Like, You Only Live Twice, I'm like, there's a lot of just problems with that movie, and then Thunderball, I just do not ever want to watch again, because I know how long that last hour of the movie is going to be.
Yeah. all very fair. I'm a little surprised where you put it, but yeah, I love this. I love
It
that
was.
we have
I mean, it's the kind of
list.
thing like
yeah.
like looking at my list. I'm like, I almost put it above Honor Majesty's Secret Service because I like Roger Moore better in this movie than Lazenby, but I liked, I think, enough other elements of Honor Majesty's Secret Service,
which is what I talk about too. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I really like this movie, obviously. When I watched it going into it, I expected it to be one of my contenders for one of my 5 favorite Bond movies. Like Frank said, Frank's list could very well end up being my list at the end of this all. Certainly, I don't think Live and Let Die is going to finish any lower than like 7th in my final Bond rankings. I just really do love this movie. I think it's a ton of fun. For the last time, I'll reference the fact that I think it is kind of similar DNA to like Goldfinger, which obviously is a masterpiece. I think the things that separate it from that movie for me, right, are I do like Sean Connery more than Roger Moore, and I think that is Sean Connery's best movie, so it's also, he's going to have such a good Connery performance. I like Goldfinger more than Kananga, I like Pussy Galore more than Solitaire, and I think Goldfinger is able to keep up its just like crazy brisk pacing all the way through the end, where I think, like Frank said, we didn't really get into it, but this movie I think does kind of take a bit of a hit in the last act with the back-to-back chases and then the weird train scene at the end. But
I just really wanted I wanted to touch on that because I like, there's a part of me that I'm like, oh, I bet Logan really likes the train sequence because you love the brawl between Red Grant and Connery so much in the close quarter train sequence. But obviously you kind of already touched on the fact that you don't think Moore works as a brawler as well as Connery did.
I think that's not the issue. I think it's more like it very much is inspired by that, but I think just doesn't have the buildup that one had to, that kind of give it an extra like push.
Yeah, I liked it in the same vein as like Honor Majesty Circuit Service or I'm trying to think, did Diamonds Are Forever have an element? No, I don't think it did. But it's tying things up. Yes, the big bad is gone, but there was like the loose end of Teehee out there.
Mr. Kid and Mr. Win
that
on
kind,
the boat.
Oh yeah, there it was in there. It wasn't Diamonds Forever. So yeah, it's like I appreciate that that's kind of become like just because their boss has died doesn't mean that their mission ends, and if they can get their vengeance, they're going to try and get their vengeance on Bond. I like that that's kind of becoming like the new norm as like the denouement for the movie, because there are like those issues in like the first few Bond movies of like everything ends and they're just like in the water on a life raft or whatever, and the credits roll. It's like, okay, well that was like it. Like, I appreciate that there's a little bit of like a wind down out of the movie with a little bit of last tying off whatever loose end there is.
Weirdly enough, the first Bond movie to really do that actually is Goldfinger with Goldfinger. Like they stop before it knocks stuff and then he pops back in at the end there. Frank, you were gonna say?
Yeah, I agree with some of Trevor's point there, because I think it's like I think the sequence itself is fine, and I do like that it is tying up loose ends because Teehee is literally still out there. But what kind of bothers me about it, and what kind of I think it lowers the movie, is because it's a long movie and we've already had these really extended chase sequences, and then they just are like, oh, and another action scene, and it's like, I wish, if anything, they put this like earlier in the movie, even though obviously it's like the ending. I either wish it was like they dealt with Teehee the same time they kill Kananga and Whisper, and then it's just over and they get on the train and then it cuts to Baron outside, because I think that's awesome. Like, I'm fine with that. Or I wish it was like, this is like when they're still on the run and like they're being hunted. Like if it's a thing where like Teehee hunts them on the train and then he throws Teehee like out the window and that's the end for Teehee, and then we go into like the boat chase or something. Like it's just like a weird thing for me of like where it is and how it plays out.
For me, it's just the length of it.
Totally.
And the destruction and the train car. Like the fact, like I do not think we needed the entire smashed window and smashed bathroom sequence. I think you cut those two sequences out of it. It keeps it like a tight, like couple minutes of a conflict, and Teehee is dealt with in a satisfying manner with Bond cutting the wires and then
flipping him over,
and then flipping him out the opened window, not needing to smash one. Because my thought is, it's just going to be freezing all night in there.
True.
Yeah, for me, ultimately, though, I really like Live and Let Die, like we talked about. It is going to be my second favorite Bond movie we've watched so far. It'll knock down From Russia with Love. And I really like From Russia with Love. Honestly, I would say I think the first 3 movies for sure, and Goldfinger, Live and Let Die, and From Russia with Love on my list, I think are all great movies. I don't think any of them... I think those are all just great Bond movies. I think then kind of that next 4 movie tier of You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thunderball, and Doctor No, you could probably ask me any given Sunday, and I would switch my answer of how I'd rank those. I'm on a particularly sour You Only Live Twice note right now, so it's at the top, but I also am kind of like, I should put it even lower than that. And then I think Diamonds Are Forever, while a ton of fun to watch with Trevor in a like Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of fashion, is just, it's objectively just not good. But yeah, so that would be my list. Otherwise, that's everything. We won't do.
We're not
really do
ranking
Bond on
more...
Bond because it's only his first one, I guess. I don't really know if you want to start.
I was going to say I'd still put him above Lazenby.
100%.
Oh yeah, I mean I would agree.
100%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So
1000%.
I'll make that edit. I mean, well, Cameron hates Lazenby, I think, but
so much, such a anyway.
Yeah, he's a weird Bond. I agree. So that is the show. If you like what you watched, you can go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you should already be on this YouTube exclusive series, and hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment below telling us what you liked or didn't like about Live and Let Die on our various rankings. You can also go over to thatnerdysite.com, where you can find the written review of this film as well, with kind of my more in-depth thoughts on everything. Otherwise, you can go find, let's see if I can do this without knowing their handles. You can go find Frank at Irrelevant Jokes on the internet. Anything that you want to plug, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to our other podcast, That Nerdy Site Show. It's kind of the main show where we all come together and talk about topics like this, or even just other random stuff. So I can't say what is in specifically the episode that was most recent at the time you're listening to this.
Live, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't say what is in that episode, but I'm sure it's fantastic, and I recommend you check it out.
Probably something we talked about the Uncharted movie at some point recently, so you can go.
Yeah, that's true.
And
you
Sully.
can go find Cameron at Rev Cabot.
Yeah, you can find me there.
Okay, perfect. Anything you want to plug, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive.
You know how this goes. Well,
why it's just like there was a pause after Rev Cabot, and I was like,
because I didn't write yours down, so I'm just pulling it from memory to make sure.
Okay,
right.
yeah, no. Yeah. I was waiting. I was like, is there like, aren't you supposed to be like, can't you like the follow up to that? But then you were like waiting for confirmation. No, you can find like interesting stuff that I do usually on the YouTube channel, but also like we've been putting out and we'll be putting out some like interesting articles concerning Game of the Year, kind of like as a wrap up as we're about to like dive head on into like review stuff for February, which is just could have been more stacked. Thank goodness some stuff they made the realization they should delay it. If only for sales reasons. Very happy that we're going to be able to get some breathing room here, but February is still going to be jam packed. So look forward to a lot more stuff. Pay attention to That Nerdy Site show, because a lot of our reviews will be coming out there. But also keep an eye out for some cool projects in the works.
Mm-hmm. You can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trevor, anything that you want to plug?
I will go ahead and plug That D Plus show, our weekly Disney Plus or potentially in the future streaming series show, where you can go. It's a lot of the vibes of this one where we dive into trivia and we talk about how these things hold up and all that stuff. But it's also where you can catch like all of our latest thoughts, like on Book of Boba Fett or whatever. So you can go check out that series as well. YouTube.com/thatnerdysite, or that one is on podcast services and whatnot. So yeah, go check out that D Plus show.
Agreed. And you can go find me at LeftyLogie at LeftyLoggy, LOGGY on the internet. I will echo all those shoutouts. They're all great things to go check out, watch, or read. And again, you can also go find the written review of this episode at thatnerdysite.com. Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on the internet. For myself, Trevor, Cam, Frank, and all of us here at That Nerdy Site, thank you for watching, and That Bond Show will return with the man with the golden gun.